Chapter 15, The Return Part 2. Jon. Master Xi's study smelled of ink and old paper, the same familiar scent Jon remembered from his lessons months ago. Scrolls lined the walls in careful rows, each one labeled in Xi's precise calligraphy. Morning light slanted through the narrow windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazily through the air like golden snow. "Remove your shirt," Xi said, his voice carrying the clinical detachment of a scholar examining a particularly interesting text. "Sit on the bench." Jon complied, pulling the simple cotton garment over his head and folding it neatly beside him. The study was warm despite the early hour, and he felt no discomfort as the old scholar approached with his instruments, thin metal rods of varying lengths, a set of bronze measuring tools edged with gradations too fine for Jon to read, and a length of silk cord marked at regular intervals with red dye. The examination was more thorough than Feng's had been. Different tools, different focus. Where Feng had assessed bone structure and martial capacity, Xi assessed overall health with a physician's eye. He pressed 2 fingers against Jon's wrist, counting pulse beats with his eyes half closed in concentration. He held a polished bronze disc to Jon's chest, listening to his breathing with an intensity that suggested he could hear things ordinary ears could not. He had Jon bend and stretch and twist, measuring the range of each movement with precise notation on a scroll that grew longer as the examination progressed. Jon waited. He was used to this now, being examined, assessed, and measured. The monastery had taught him patience. The ability to let others see what they needed to see without trying to influence their conclusions. 2 months of Feng's silence had cured him of the need to fill quiet spaces with words. What will he find? Will it match what Feng said? Finally, Xi set down his instruments. He studied his notes for a long moment, his brush hovering over the scroll as if he wanted to add something but couldn't find the words. "Remarkable." The word came out almost involuntarily, Xi's scholarly composure cracking for just a moment. His eyebrows rose, and he looked at Jon as if seeing him for the first time. "Your fingers have completely regenerated. Not healed, regenerated. The bone density is higher than it was before they were broken. The joint alignment is actually superior to what it would have been naturally." He lifted Jon's right hand, turning it over in his own, pressing gently at each knuckle. "Here, feel this. The second finger, the one that was damaged worst. Press against mine." Jon pressed. The finger responded instantly and smoothly, with none of the hesitation or weakness he'd grown accustomed to. "Feng said the rebuilding makes things stronger. Feng undersold it." Xi made another note on his scroll, his brush moving in quick, precise strokes. "Your ribs show similar improvement. The fracture sites are gone. Not scarred over, gone. As if they never broke. I've read accounts of the golden marrow art's effects, but I confess I thought some of them were exaggerated. I see now they were not." Jon flexed his right hand, watching the fingers curl and extend without pain. Even after weeks of experiencing it, the sensation still amazed him. For so long, his body had been a cage of limitations. Now that cage had been dismantled, bar by bar. "But more interesting is your lung capacity," Xi continued, setting aside the scroll and meeting Jon's eyes directly. "The seawater scarring hasn't disappeared. That would be beyond even the golden marrow art. Some damage is permanent, written too deeply into the flesh to be erased. But the rib expansion has increased enough to compensate. Your breathing capacity is approximately 90% of normal now, compared to 70% before." 90%? Jon considered the number. "Is that enough?" "For most purposes, yes. For daily life, for normal martial training, for everything except the most demanding techniques, more than sufficient." Xi paused, choosing his next words carefully. "For your breathing techniques at full power, that depends on the next stage of training." Xi set down his brush and met Jon's eyes with the gravity he usually reserved for discussions of history and strategy. "You understand that this is only the foundation," Feng explained. "I can't use the techniques yet. More than that. The bone washing has given you the capacity to support greater power. But capacity and ability are different things. Ji rose from his seat and moved to the window, his robes rustling softly. If you tried to use your breathing techniques now. I won't. Good. Ji turned back to face him. Because if you did, you might succeed. Your body could handle it for a time. But you would burn through the foundation faster than it can be reinforced. Like building a fire too hot for the hearth. It might hold, or it might crack the stones. And cracked stones cannot be repaired, only replaced. Jon nodded slowly. He'd felt the temptation already, in quiet moments, the knowledge that his body was different now, that perhaps he could try the techniques without breaking. The memory of those 3 seconds in the training yard haunted him. The feeling of power flowing through him, the swords moving as extensions of his will. But Feng's warnings echoed louder. Foundation before tower. Structure before strength. I have to wait for marrow refinement. You have to complete marrow refinement. 6 to 12 months more. Then and only then will your body be truly ready to channel what your techniques demand. Ji returned to his seat, folding his hands in his lap. The second stage is different from the first. Less painful, in the physical sense. But more demanding in others. You will need to guide the growth with your mind and feel your bones strengthening from within. It requires a kind of awareness most people never develop. Feng mentioned that. He said some students fail the second stage even after completing the first. Because they expect the same kind of challenge. They prepare for pain and find meditation instead. Many martial artists have strong bodies but weak minds, or rather, minds trained only for external focus, not internal awareness. Ji's eyes were knowing. You, I think, will not have that problem. Your mind has always been your greatest weapon, even when your body was failing you. Ji rolled up his scroll and set it aside but made no move to dismiss Jon. His expression shifted from clinical assessment to something more complex, the look he wore when discussing matters of politics and war. There's something else you should know. While you were gone, the political situation has evolved. General Kai's war councils. The rivalry between the great houses has intensified beyond what anyone predicted. Ji moved to a map that hung on his wall Yiti in careful detail, each major fortress marked, each border drawn. There have been skirmishes on the western border. Several fortresses have changed hands. The Azure Emperor's grip weakens by the month, and the great houses smell opportunity. Jon studied the map. He recognized some of the names now, houses he'd read about in Ji's histories, fortresses whose strategic importance he'd learned to analyze. But seeing them marked with fresh ink, with annotations in Ji's hand indicating troop movements and battles, made the abstract suddenly real. How bad is it? Not open war. Not yet. But close enough that wise men are preparing. Ji traced a line on the map with one thin finger. General Kai has spent the last 2 months in constant negotiation. Alliances are forming, shifting, and breaking apart. Everyone is trying to position themselves for what comes next. And what does come next? That depends on many factors. Including some that seem small now but may prove decisive. Ji turned from the map to face Jon directly. In 2 months, there will be a tournament. The Festival of Crossed Swords, held in the capital. Representatives from every major house will compete. It's part martial exhibition, part political maneuvering. Victories in the arena translate to influence in the council chambers. Why are you telling me this? Because General Kai has expressed interest in sending someone unexpected. Someone who might demonstrate that House Kai has resources others don't know about. Capabilities that could tip the balance when the real conflict begins. The implication was clear. Jon was the unexpected resource. A foreign boy trained by the Stone Tiger, wielding techniques no one in Yiti had seen. A weapon no one knew existed. I'm not ready. No. Not for this tournament. But there will be others. The Festival of Crossed Swords occurs twice yearly, and there are lesser competitions throughout the provinces. Xi's voice carried a weight. Jon had learned to recognize the weight of plans being laid, futures being shaped. By the time you complete your training. The sentence hung unfinished. Full of possibility. Full of expectation. Full of pressure Jon hadn't expected to feel. Jon. The afternoon sun warmed the garden as Jon and Mei Ling sat on their bench, in the same positions they'd held 100 times before. Cherry blossoms had given way to summer leaves, the trees heavy with green, casting dappled shadows across the stone paths. Can I see them? She didn't need to ask what he meant. The question had been hovering between them since his return, unspoken but present. Are you sure? Her voice was careful. You said having them would tempt you. That you might try to use them before you're ready. I'm sure. I just want to, remember. What I'm working toward. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her, because she nodded and rose from the bench. Come with me. Jon had never been in Mei Ling's room before. It was larger than his. She was the general's daughter, after all, but less ornate than he'd expected. The walls were plain wood, undecorated except for a single scroll painting of mountains in mist. Books were everywhere, stacked on shelves and piled on the floor, some bristling with paper markers where she'd noted passages of interest. A practice sword leaned in one corner, its edge dulled from use. Her desk was covered with papers and half-finished calligraphy, with ink brushes scattered among them in careful disorder. This was not the room of a general's daughter playing at scholarship. This was the room of someone who actually read, actually studied, and actually practiced. She's been working, Jon realized. Not just waiting. Growing. She moved to a chest at the foot of her bed, dark wood, carved with patterns Jon didn't recognize, and knelt to open it. From within, she retrieved a bundle wrapped in silk. Deep blue silk, embroidered with silver wolves running in an endless circle. I had the silk made, she said, not quite meeting his eyes. The wolves were my idea. I thought, you'd like them. Jon's throat tightened. The wolves were crude compared to the stark sigil he remembered from Winterfell, but they were clearly wolves running, free, and fierce. She'd remembered what he told her about his house, about his family. She'd incorporated it into the keeping of his dream. I do. She placed the bundle in his hands. It was heavier than he expected, or perhaps memory had lightened it. He unwrapped it slowly, the silk sliding away to reveal the twin practice swords he'd carved himself in those pre-dawn hours behind the stable. Wood, not steel. Simple, even crude compared to real weapons. The grain was uneven, the balance imperfect, and the edges rough where his inexperienced hands had struggled with the carving knife. But they were precious anyway. Precious because of what they represented. The dream of Arthur Dane. The hope that he could become something more than what he was. He took them in his hands. They were lighter than he remembered. Or maybe his hands were stronger. Either way, when he shifted his grip, testing the weight, the balance felt different than it had before the monastery. His fingers wrapped around the hilts without pain, without trembling. His wrists turned smoothly, without the grinding protest of damaged joints. He could use these now. Really use them. His body wouldn't betray him the way it had in the training yard. But I shouldn't. Not yet. Not until the foundation is complete. He didn't swing them. Didn't practice any forms. Just held them, feeling their weight, remembering. Arthur Dane. What? That's who I was thinking of when I made these. The greatest knight who ever lived. 2 swords, like him. Mei Ling sat on the edge of her bed, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Patient. Curious. Something else beneath. But Feng was right, Jon continued. I wasn't really chasing Arthur Dane. I was chasing worthiness. Proof that I could be something more than what I was. More than the bastard of Winterfell. more than the slave they branded and broke. And now? Jon turned the swords over in his hands, watching the afternoon light play across the wood grain. Each whirl and knot was familiar. He'd stared at them for hours during those secret practice sessions, memorizing every detail. Now I think maybe worthiness isn't about being like someone else. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. Arthur Dayne was Arthur Dayne. I can only be Jon Snow. That sounds like wisdom. It sounds like something Feng would say. A small smile crossed his face. Maybe some of his teaching stuck. The decision came easier than he expected. Keep them. Until I'm ready. Jon, you could. I know. He met her eyes. My hands work now. I could practice without breaking. I could start learning the forms, building the muscle memory. Part of me wants to badly. Then why not? Because I'd be building on an incomplete foundation. Feng said, foundation before tower. If I start practicing the advanced forms now, I'll develop habits based on what my body can do today, not what it will be able to do after marrow refinement. He began wrapping the swords again, carefully, the silk wolves gleaming in the afternoon light. When the second stage is done, when I can use the breathing techniques without destroying myself, then I'll take them back. Then I'll earn them. Mei Ling took the bundle from him. Held it against her chest, the way she'd held it the first time, the day he'd given them to her in the garden. I'll keep them safe. Like before. I know you will. And when you come back when you're ready, we'll find out if you're as good as Arthur Dayne. I'll never be as good as Arthur Dayne. Then you'll be as good as Jon Snow. She smiled, that fierce, sharp smile he'd carried through 2 months of darkness. That might be better. Sun Cao. He'd been watching Jon for 3 days now. Not obviously. Sun Cao was too proud for obvious interest, but watching nonetheless. From the edges of rooms. Through windows. During meals when he thought no one was paying attention. The foreign boy was different. Not just physically, though that was part of it. The white hair was the same, the grey eyes, the lean build. But he moved differently. Stood differently. There was a groundedness to him now that hadn't been there before, the same quality Sun Cao had seen in his father's most senior officers, men who had trained for decades and fought in a dozen campaigns. The quality of someone who knew exactly where their feet were planted and exactly what their body could do. The Stone Tiger's training, Sun Cao thought. It actually worked. Part of him had hoped it wouldn't. Had hoped Jon would return the same as before, or worse, damaged further by training his body couldn't handle. That would have been simpler. It's easier to maintain the distance, the rivalry, and the comfortable hostility. Instead, the foreign boy had come back transformed, and Sun Cao found himself uncertain how to feel about it. He found Jon in the training yard late afternoon, practicing basic forms alone, no weapons, no breathing techniques, just movement. The same forms Sun Cao had learned as a child, the foundation of every martial style taught in UTI. Jon's execution was competent. Better than competent in some ways. His movements had a fluidity that spoke of natural talent, an instinctive understanding of how bodies were meant to move. But the technical details were wrong. Small errors that a proper teacher would have corrected years ago. Habits that had been allowed to calcify through self-teaching. Sun Cao watched for several minutes, cataloging the flaws. The dropped shoulder. The incorrect hip rotation. The timing errors in transitions. Things that wouldn't matter in a street fight but would be fatal against a trained opponent. He's going to represent this fortress someday, Sun Cao realized. In tournaments. Maybe in battle. And he's going to embarrass us all if no one fixes this. Before he could think better of it, he was walking toward the training area. Jon noticed his approach but didn't stop. His focus remained on the forms, though Sun Cao could tell some portion of his attention had shifted, aware, alert, prepared for conflict. He expects me to mock him. That's what I would have done before. You're dropping your left shoulder. Jon paused mid-movement. Looked at Sun Cao with an expression of pure surprise. What? In the transition between the second and third positions. You're dropping your left shoulder. It opens your side to a thrust. Anyone with proper training would put a blade through your ribs before you finished the movement. Jon's surprise deepened. Sun Cao had never offered correction before. Criticism, yes, sharp words about technique, about form, about the presumption of a foreign-born nobody thinking he could compete with properly trained students. Mockery, occasionally, when Mei Ling wasn't around to glare at him. But not genuine instruction. Like this. Jon adjusted, raising his left shoulder, holding the position for Sun Cao's inspection. Better. But your hip is still leading wrong. You're rotating from the waist instead of the core. It costs you power and balance. Here. Before he realized what he was doing, Sun Cao was demonstrating. Moving through the transition himself, showing Jon the proper alignment: hips square, weight centered, power flowing from the ground up through the legs and core and out through the arms. The way his own teachers had shown him years ago, before his father died, before he became an orphan taken in by another man's charity. Jon copied the movement. Closer this time. Still not perfect. Years of self-teaching couldn't be corrected in minutes, but the improvement was visible. They stood together in the training yard, an uncomfortable truce settling over them. The late afternoon sun stretched their shadows across the packed earth, two figures who had been at odds for so long they'd almost forgotten why. Why? Why what? Why are you helping me? You've never wanted to before. Sun Cao considered lying. Deflecting. Maintaining the old hostility was easier than whatever this was. The foreign boy had taken something from him: Mei Ling's attention, Mei Ling's affection, a place in the household that should have been Sun Cao's alone. But something about Jon's directness, the same directness that used to irritate him, demanded honesty in return. In the training yard. The day you collapsed. I saw something. Everyone saw something. I saw 3 seconds of something impossible. Movement that shouldn't exist, two swords flowing like water, patterns I've never seen in any martial tradition. Sun Cao's voice was steady, but the memory still unsettled him. And then I saw you break. Your hand is cramping. Your body failing you. The look on your face when you realized what was happening. He met Jon's eyes. And I realized I was angry at the wrong thing. What do you mean? I was angry that you existed. That you'd washed up on our beach and stolen everything I thought was mine: Mei Ling's friendship, Master Xi's attention, a place in this household. I was angry that you had something I didn't understand, some power or technique or gift that made people look at you differently. The words came harder now, dragged up from somewhere Sun Cao had tried not to examine too closely. But when you broke, when your body failed you in front of everyone, I recognized it. The feeling of your own limits stopping you. Of wanting something so badly and having your own flesh betray you. Jon said nothing. Just waited. Listening in a way Sun Cao hadn't expected. I'll never move like you moved in those 3 seconds. Not if I train for 50 years. That's not false modesty, it's truth. Whatever you have, whatever technique or gift the gods gave you, I don't have it. I never will. Then why help me? Because you'll never have what I have either. A thin smile crossed Sun Cao's face. Discipline. Structure. The proper foundation. Years of training with real teachers, real techniques, and real correction. You taught yourself in stable yards and back alleys. You have raw talent, maybe the most raw talent I've ever seen, but your technique is full of holes. He gestured at the training yard around them. Feng's training fixed your bones. But it didn't fix your forms. If you're going to represent this fortress someday in tournaments or battles, you should at least fight correctly. Otherwise you'll embarrass all of us, and I refuse to be associated with someone who can't even execute a basic transition properly. Jon's expression shifted. Something like understanding dawned in his grey eyes. That's almost generous. Don't get used to it. I won't. They stood in silence for a moment. The training yard was empty except for them. The afternoon heat had driven most of the household inside, leaving the two boys alone with their uneasy peace. Something had shifted between them. Not friendship. Sun Cao wasn't ready for that and might never be ready for that. But something else. Recognition, perhaps. Respect, grudging but genuine. He came back, Sun Cao thought. He went to the stone tiger and didn't break. That means something. Even if I don't want to admit it. Thank you, Jon said finally. For the correction. Thank me by fixing your forms. The left shoulder thing is embarrassing. If you fight in a tournament like that, people will think the fortress has no standards. Jon laughed. It was the first time Sun Cao had heard him laugh like that, not at Sun Cao, not despite him, but with him. Like they were sharing something instead of competing for it. Maybe there's something here after all, Sun Cao thought, surprising himself. Something we can build. Not friendship. But partnership, perhaps. Alliance. Same time tomorrow? Jon asked. Sun Cao considered refusing. Considered retreating to the familiar distance. Instead, he nodded. Same time. Don't be late. And practice those transitions tonight. I won't waste my time teaching someone who doesn't work on their own. He walked away before Jon could respond, before the moment could become something more than he was ready for. But he was smiling slightly as he went. Jon. The days blurred into each other, precious and fleeting. Morning walks in the garden, before the day's heat settled in. Mei Ling pointed out new flowers that had bloomed while he was gone: orange lilies, white jasmine, and late-blooming roses in shades of red and pink. Jon described the monastery's austere beauty in return, the way dawnlight painted the mountain peaks, and the silence that was so complete you could hear your own heartbeat. Meals together, talking about everything and nothing. Jon learned what had happened in the fortress during his absence, which servants had married, which officers had been promoted, and what rumors circulated about the war councils. Mei Ling pressed for details about the training, about Feng, and about the monks who had gradually come to acknowledge Jon's presence. Afternoons in the training yard, first with Sun Cao correcting his forms, then watching Mei Ling practice her own sword work. She'd improved the older boy's teaching, reluctantly given, had made a visible difference. Her movements were sharper now, more controlled, her footwork more certain. She still held the blade too tightly and still telegraphed her attacks, but the foundation was there. You're getting better, Jon told her after one session. Sun Cao is a demanding teacher. She wiped sweat from her forehead. He yells less than he used to, though. Maybe he's mellowing. Sun Cao doesn't mellow. I think he's just less angry now that he has someone worse than me to criticize. Evenings on their bench, watching the stars emerge. Mei Ling reading to Jon from books about the internal arts, asking questions he couldn't always answer. What does sensing the meridians actually feel like? The books make it sound like seeing colors, but that can't be right. Jon is trying to explain, struggling to put wordless experience into language. Comfortable silences that neither felt the need to fill. Neither of them talked about the departure. It hovered over every conversation, every moment, the invisible weight of the calendar counting down. But they'd agreed without agreeing to ignore it until they couldn't anymore. When you come back next time, I want to spar with you, Mei Ling said one afternoon, after she'd finished her practice. Properly. With real techniques. You might win. I definitely won't win. But I want to see how far you've come. How far we've both come. And later, in the garden. Tell me about Winterfell again. The snow. I've told you 100 times. I like hearing about it. She pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The way your voice changes when you talk about it. You sound younger. Happier. Jon looked at her at the afternoon light in her dark hair, at the fierce attention in her eyes. She'd grown while he was gone. Or maybe he was just seeing her more clearly. "Sometimes I worry I'm forgetting," he said quietly. "The details. What my brother's laugh sounded like. The smell of the gods' wood after rain. That's why you should keep telling me. So I can remember for you when you forget." And later still, on their bench as stars emerged. Feng said the next stage is harder in some ways. Easier in others. Which way is harder? The pain is less. But the meditation is more demanding. You have to feel your bones growing. Guide them with your mind. That sounds impossible. So did the first stage. I managed. Their last evening arrived too quickly. The fortress was quiet around them, the garden silver in the moonlight. Summer insects sang in the darkness, their chorus a backdrop to the silence between two children who had run out of ways to avoid what was coming. "I don't want you to go." She said it simply, without drama. A statement of fact, clear and final. "I don't want to go either. But you're going anyway." "I have to." "I know." Jon took her hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused now from sword practice harder than they'd been 2 months ago. She'd been working while he was gone. Growing. Preparing. "I'll send word when I can." Feng might allow letters during the second stage. He said the isolation is less important once the foundation is laid. Might. Probably. "I'll make him allow it." "You'll make the stone tiger do something he doesn't want to do." "For you?" "Yes." She laughed a small, sad sound and leaned against his shoulder the way she had so many times before. "Don't rush," she said quietly. "I know you want to. I know you'll try to finish in 6 months instead of 12. But don't rush for me. Do it right." "I'll do both." "That's not possible." "I'll make it possible. For you." Jon. The gate stood open in the morning light. A small group had assembled for Jon's departure. Master Ji, with his scholarly composure and kind eyes, a scroll tucked under his arm probably notes for Feng, assessments and recommendations. Sun Cao with crossed arms and an expression that revealed nothing except perhaps a hint of what might have been respect. A few servants who'd come to know him over the past year, who no longer whispered cursed or white devil when he passed. And Mei Ling, standing slightly apart, her face carefully composed into the mask of a general's daughter. Only her eyes betrayed her too bright, too fixed on Jon's face. Ji approached first. "The second stage will require everything you learned in the first. Patience. Acceptance. The willingness to let transformation happen instead of forcing it. You cannot rush bone growth any more than you can rush the seasons." "I understand. I'll send reports to Feng. Updates on the political situation, the tournament schedules, anything that might be relevant to your future here." A rare smile crossed the old scholar's face. "And I'll keep her from climbing the mountain after you. Though I may need to post guards." Sun Cao was next. Brief, as always words weren't his strength. "Work on the left shoulder." "I will." "And the hip rotation. And the third position transition." And he stopped himself, almost smiling. "Just work on everything." "That too." A pause. Something almost like warmth flickered in Sun Cao's eyes, there and gone before Jon could be sure he'd seen it. "Come back stronger. The tournaments won't wait forever." "Neither will I." Mei Ling walked with him to the gate itself, away from the others. The morning sun caught the dust motes in the air and made them glow like tiny stars. The road beyond stretched toward the mountains, toward the monastery, toward months of training and transformation. 6 to 12 months. "I'll aim for 6. Don't rush for me. Do it right." "I'll do both." She didn't cry this time. Didn't crash into him the way she had when he returned. This goodbye was quieter. More controlled. They'd both grown in these 10 days, or maybe they'd been growing all along, and only now could see how much. When she hugged him, she held on just as tight. The swords will be waiting. I know. And I'll be waiting. I know that too. She stepped back. Her eyes were bright, but the tears didn't fall. She was the general's daughter, and generals' daughters didn't cry at gates where servants might see. Go. Before I change my mind and hide you somewhere. You'd do it, too. I absolutely would. Don't test me. Jon walked through the gate. The mountain road stretched before him, familiar now, not the unknown it had been 2 months ago. He knew its curves, its climbs, and the places where the view opened up to show the valley below. He knew the villages he'd passed through, the inns where travelers rested, and the final steep ascent to the monastery gates. He didn't look back. He'd learned that lesson last time. Looking back made leaving harder. It made you want to run back, to stay, to abandon everything you'd worked for in exchange for one more day. But he carried her with him anyway. The jade wolf pendant against his chest. The memory of her face, fierce and bright and refusing to cry. The twin swords wrapped in wolf-embroidered silk, waiting in her room for him to earn them. The fortress shrank behind him. The mountains rose ahead. 6 to 12 months. Marrow refinement. The second stage of becoming whoever he was supposed to be. For you, Jon thought, touching the pendant through his shirt. For all of you. For Mei Ling and Ji and even Sun Cao. For the tournament that's coming. For the twin swords waiting to be earned. Wait for me. I'll come back stronger. I promise. The road climbed. Jon climbed with it. Chapter 16, The Marrow Refinement Part 1. Jon. The mountain road was familiar now. Jon's feet knew the stone steps without looking, knew where the footing was treacherous, where the path narrowed to a single body's width, where the switchbacks turned so sharply that careless travelers might walk off the edge into mist and oblivion. His legs remembered the rhythm of the climb, the steady pace that conserved strength for the final ascent. His lungs, stronger than before, though still not perfect, handled the thin air better than they had 2 months ago, drawing deep breaths without the familiar catch of damaged ribs. Last time, I climbed this path terrified of what waited at the top. This time, I know exactly what waits. And I'm climbing anyway. The fear was gone. Not replaced by confidence. Jon wasn't foolish enough for that, but by something quieter. Acceptance, perhaps. Understanding that the path was the path, and walking it was the only way forward. The Stone Tiger's monastery waited above, with its silence and its discipline and its demands. Jon had survived it once. He would survive it again. The mist thickened as he climbed higher, turning the world to grey and white. Shapes emerged and vanished, twisted pines clinging to rocky outcrops, streams that appeared and disappeared between boulders, the occasional bird that burst from cover at his approach. The mountain was alive in its own way, indifferent to the small human climbing its flanks. Jon touched the jade wolf pendant through his shirt. Still there. Still warm from his body heat. His connection to everything below, to Mei Ling, to the fortress, to the life he was temporarily leaving behind. I'll be back, he promised silently. Stronger. Ready. Worthy of the swords. The monastery materialized from the mist like a dream, taking solid form. Ancient stone walls, weathered by centuries of wind and rain. Curved roofs heavy with moss. The silence that wasn't empty but full of presence, of attention, of something watching. The gate stood open. Jon stopped, surprised. Last time, he'd waited for hours before anyone acknowledged his existence. The closed gate had been its own test patience before training even began. A monk stood within the entrance, hands folded inside his grey robes. Jon recognized him, the man who had brought his meals during the bone washing, who had left tea outside his door on cold mornings without ever speaking a word. Jon Snow. You're expected. Not Master Ji's student or the foreign boy or the Western one. His name. recognition. Acknowledgement that he was someone the monastery knew, someone who had earned the right to be addressed directly. I belong here now, Jon realized as he stepped through the gate. Or at least, I'm not a stranger anymore. The central courtyard was unchanged, the same swept stone, the same ancient trees with their gnarled branches reaching toward the sky, the same flat rock worn smooth by generations of students who had stood upon it, knelt upon it, broken upon it. The grooves in the stone told stories Jon could now read, the worn paths where feet had paced during training, the smooth patches where knees had pressed during meditation, the subtle depressions where countless bodies had found their limits and pushed beyond. Jon saw it differently now. He knew what those patterns meant. He'd added his own footsteps to the grooves. Master Feng Huang stood beside the flat rock, hands clasped behind his back, watching Jon approach with those unreadable black eyes. The stone tiger looked exactly as he had 2 months ago, small, compact, ancient, immovable. As if time touched him only lightly, leaving marks but not damage. You returned. I said I would. Many say that. Fewer follow through. A pause, the silence stretching between them like a held breath. How was your time in the flatlands? Short. Good. Hard to leave. Yet you left. The training isn't finished. Something shifted in Feng's expression, not quite approval, but acknowledgement. Recognition that Jon understood what mattered and what didn't. The old master circled Jon slowly, the same examination as before but briefer. He already knew what he would find. His fingers pressed briefly against Jon's wrist, his shoulder, his ribs. Testing. Confirming. The foundation holds. Good. You didn't damage it with impatience. Ji warned me not to use the techniques. Ji is wise. Wiser than most give him credit for. Feng completed his circuit and stood before Jon again. The bone washing broke you down and rebuilt you. The marrow refinement will fill what we built with strength. He gestured toward the eastern terrace, the same place where Jon had spoken his truth about Alya and Rob and Mei Ling, where Feng had finally accepted him as a student. The first stage was about destruction and reconstruction. External processes, applied to you. You endured them. This stage is different. How? This stage comes from within. You will learn to feel your own bones. To guide their growth. To cultivate the golden light that transforms mere calcium into something stronger. Feng's eyes found Jon's, held them. The bone washing required endurance. The marrow refinement requires stillness. He paused. I suspect you will find stillness more difficult than pain. Jon didn't argue. He already knew it was true. Jon. The new routine revealed itself over the first days. No more dawn baths. No more herbal fire seeping into bones, no more the acrid smell of 17 compounds designed to burn away weakness. The eastern courtyard stood empty in the mornings, the great stone basin covered and dormant. Instead, meditation. Hours of it. In the eastern courtyard as the sun rose, painting the mountain peaks in shades of gold and rose. In his cell during the long afternoons, when the monastery drowsed in summer heat. In the evening, as stars emerged and the temperature dropped and his breath fogged in the thin air. The schedule unfolded with monastic precision. Dawn, meditation in the eastern courtyard, seated on cold stone, breathing and being. Morning, breathing exercises different from his techniques, slower and deeper, focused inward rather than outward. No enhancement. No power. Just breath moving through the body like water through channels. Midday, light physical practice with the monks, maintaining the body without stressing it. Forms so slow they barely qualified as movement, positions held until muscles trembled and then held longer. Afternoon, meditation again. More sitting. More breathing. More stillness. Evening, instruction with Feng, the only time speech was expected or welcomed. Night, meditation before sleep, the golden light visualization that Feng was teaching him to cultivate. The first day, Jon felt relief. No pain. No burning. Just sitting and breathing and trying to feel something he couldn't quite grasp. After 2 months of agony, the absence of suffering felt almost luxurious. The second day, he felt restless. His body wanted to move, to train, to do something. The sitting felt like waiting for something to happen, waiting for the real training to begin. The third day, he understood what Feng had meant. This is harder than the basins. At least in the basins, I knew what I was fighting. Close your eyes. Breathe. Not your external techniques, those are for later. Simple breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow. Jon obeyed. The mountain air filled his lungs, thin, cold, sharp with pine and stone. He held it for a moment, then released it in a steady stream. Again. Again. The rhythm of breath becoming the only rhythm that mattered. Now. Feel your right hand. Not the skin, not the muscle. The bones beneath. Jon tried. He focused on his right hand, the hand that had been broken in Grazdan's compound, rebuilt by Master Ji, transformed by the bone washing. He knew those bones intimately. He'd felt them burning during the first stage, had felt them soften and reshape and emerge stronger than before. But feeling them now, without pain as a guide. He felt his skin. The calluses on his palm. The temperature of the air against his fingers. He felt his muscles. The small movements of tendons as he tried to hold perfectly still. The slight tremor that came from effort, from trying too hard. He felt nothing deeper. His bones remained invisible to his inner sense, present but imperceptible, like trying to see the back of his own head. I can't. I just feel, hand. You feel skin. Muscle. The surface. Feng's voice was patient, but only barely. Go deeper. How? By sitting here until you do. Days passed. Jon sat. Breathed. Tried to feel his bones. He felt everything else. The cold stone beneath him, slowly warming from his body heat. The wind on his face, carrying scents of pine and distant snow. The ache in his legs from sitting cross-legged for hours, the muscles cramping and releasing and cramping again. But his bones remained invisible to his inner sense. Present but imperceptible. He could imagine them, could picture the skeleton he knew existed beneath his flesh, but imagination wasn't feeling. The picture in his mind had no connection to sensation, no link to the body it was meant to represent. The frustration built slowly, like water behind a dam. The bone washing had been agony, but it had been clear. Pain meant progress. Survival meant success. Each morning in the basin, Jon knew exactly what he was fighting. The fire in his bones, the urge to scream, the desperate need to escape. The enemy was obvious. Victory was obvious. Endure, and you win. This was different. There was no pain to push through. No clear marker of advancement. Just endless sitting and the growing certainty that he was failing at something he didn't understand. Mei Ling would laugh, he thought during one particularly frustrating session. She'd say, I'm finally learning what it's like for normal people. People who can't move impossibly fast or fight like demons. Normal people have to work for everything. Have to sit and practice and fail and try again without any guarantee of success. Maybe that's what Feng is really teaching me. Day 10. Dawn. The eastern courtyard. Jon sat as the sun rose, painting the mountain peaks in shades of gold and rose. He'd stopped trying so hard sometime during the previous days, had stopped straining towards something he couldn't reach, stopped clenching his mind like a fist around the elusive bone sense. He just sat. Breathed. Existed. The mountain didn't care whether he succeeded or failed. The sun rose regardless. The wind blew regardless. The world continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to the small human sitting on cold stone trying to feel his own skeleton. Maybe that's the point. Maybe I'm supposed to stop mattering so much. And then, a flicker. Not sight, not sound, something else entirely. A sense of structure beneath his flesh. The architecture of his hand, felt from within. Not imagined, not pictured, but felt the bones there, solid and real, distinct from the muscle and skin that wrapped them. It was gone almost immediately. But it had been there. Jon opened his eyes. The courtyard was unchanged. The sun continued to rise. But something was different now. He found Feng watching him from the edge of the terrace, those black eyes missing nothing. I felt something. Feng didn't look surprised. Didn't look pleased either. Describe it. Like seeing the frame of a house through the walls. Just for a moment. The bones were there, solid, separate from everything else. Then it was gone. That is the beginning. The first glimpse of what you must learn to see clearly. How long until I can hold it? That depends entirely on you. Jon. The bone sense came and went like a shy animal, appearing when Jon wasn't looking for it, vanishing the moment he tried to grasp it directly. Some days he could find it within a few breaths, could hold it for minutes at a time, his skeleton present in his awareness, solid and real, the architecture of his body felt from within. Other days, nothing. Just the frustrating blankness of a mind that wouldn't cooperate, the familiar sensations of skin and muscle blocking his access to what lay beneath. You're trying to force it, Feng observed during one evening session, after Jon had spent the entire day failing to find the bone sense. Stillness cannot be forced. It must be allowed. I don't know how to allow. I only know how to do. Yes. That is your problem. Jon wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that doing was what had kept him alive in Winterfell, in Yunkai, in the storm. That action was survival and stillness was death, and he couldn't simply unlearn everything his life had taught him. But Feng wouldn't care about excuses. Feng cared about results. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day, Feng spoke more than usual. They sat on the eastern terrace, tea steaming between them. The ritual of tea was significant, Jon had learned. Feng only shared tea when something important was being said, when the teaching went beyond technique into something deeper. Your external techniques, the breathing arts from across the sea, they are about action. Speed. Force. The explosion of power in a single moment. Yes. The internal arts are the opposite. They are about stillness. Accumulation. The slow gathering of strength over years, not seconds. Feng poured tea, his movements precise and unhurried. The steam curled upward, caught the last light of sunset, vanished into the gathering dusk. You have trained yourself to act. To move. To respond instantly to threat. This is valuable. This has kept you alive through circumstances that would have killed others. But it has also made stillness feel like death. When you stop moving, some part of you believes you are in danger. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through Jon's understanding. He's right. He's completely right. Jon thought of the slave pits, where stillness meant vulnerability, where stopping to rest invited the guards' attention, invited the whips and the breaking. He thought of the storm, where stopping meant drowning, where he'd kept swimming long past the point of exhaustion because the alternative was death. He thought of the training yard at Winterfell, where hesitation earned bruises, where Sir Roderick taught that action was safety and reaction was survival. His entire life had taught him that stillness was dangerous. That stopping meant dying. That the moment you ceased moving was the moment something caught you. How do I change that? By sitting here, day after day, being still and not dying. Eventually, your body will believe what your mind already knows. That stillness can be safe. That stillness can be power. Not the explosive power of your external techniques, but power nonetheless. The mountain is still and the mountain cannot be moved. The meditation brought things up. Not flashbacks, not the drowning terror of trauma, the world collapsing into memory and sensation. Just memories, rising to the surface like bubbles in still water. Floating up from depths Jon had tried not to examine. Winterfell. The gods would. Sitting beneath the heart tree on summer afternoons, the red leaves rustling above him, the hot springs warming the air until it felt like a blessing from the old gods. He'd sat there for hours sometimes, just existing. Just being. A boy in a garden, not yet touched by the strangeness that would change everything. That was stillness too. Before everything went wrong. Before I became something people feared. He'd forgotten he knew how to be still. The world had beaten it out of him, the slave ships and the pits and the storm, the desperate flight across continents, the constant need to move and adapt and survive. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost the boy who could sit beneath a weirwood and simply be. Maybe Feng isn't teaching me something new. Maybe he's helping me remember something old. Something I lost when I stopped being a boy and started being a survivor. The thought was strangely comforting. If stillness was something he'd once known, perhaps he could know it again. Not learning a foreign skill, but recovering a lost one. Coming home to a part of himself he'd abandoned. By the 6th week, the bone sense came more easily. Jon could find it within a few breaths, could hold it for minutes at a time. He felt his skeleton as a complete structure, not just his hand, but his arm, his ribs, his spine. The rebuilt architecture of his body, sensed from within like a house knowing its own frame. It was strange. Intimate in a way nothing else had ever been. He was feeling parts of himself that no one else could touch, would ever touch. The deepest layer of his physical being, hidden beneath flesh and muscle, finally revealed to his inner awareness. "You've reached the first plateau," Feng said after observing one of Jon's meditation sessions. "The foundation of feeling. Is that good? It's necessary. Without it, the next step is impossible." "What's the next step?" "You've learned to feel your bones. Now you must learn to speak to them." Jon. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the eastern terrace in shades of gold and crimson. Jon sat across from Feng, their positions mirrored, legs crossed, hands resting on knees, spines straight but not rigid. The evening sessions had become Jon's favorite part of the training. During the day, he struggled alone with stillness and bone sense and the constant temptation to move, to act, to do something. But in the evenings, Feng taught. Explained. Revealed the deeper purposes beneath the endless meditation. "What you've learned so far is perception," Feng said, his voice quiet in the mountain stillness. "Sensing what is. The bones exist, you've learned to feel them. Now you will learn cultivation. Growing what could be. Growing. The golden light." Feng's eyes caught the last rays of sunset, gleaming like dark mirrors. "Close your eyes. Find your bones as you've practiced." Jon closed his eyes. The bone sense came quickly now, the skeleton within, solid and present. His ribs curved around his lungs. His spine stacked vertebra upon vertebra. His arms extended, hands resting on knees, each finger articulated perfectly. "Good. Now imagine light. Golden light, like sunlight made liquid. Imagine it pooling in your bones. Filling the hollows where marrow lives." Jon imagined. Golden light, warm and bright, seeping into his bones like honey. He pictured it flowing through the architecture of his skeleton, collecting in the spaces within the marrow cavities, the small hollows that the bone washing had cleansed and rebuilt. For a moment, nothing happened. Just imagination, just pictures in his mind with no connection to his body. Pretty images floating in darkness. Then, a warmth. Faint but real. In his right hand, where the bones had been most damaged, where the bone washing had worked hardest. Not imagined warmth. Actual warmth, rising from within. "I feel something. Warmth. In my hand. That is the beginning of the golden light. The first spark of what will become cultivation." "The golden light is not magic," Feng said, pouring tea as the last light faded from the sky. It is not mysticism. It is the body's own power, directed by the mind. I don't understand. Your body is constantly rebuilding itself. Old cells die, new cells are born. Bones grow, heal, strengthen. This happens without your awareness, without your control. The body knows its work and does it, as the heart beats and the lungs breathe. He gestured to his own hand, held up against the darkening sky. The golden light is learning to guide that process. To tell your bones how to grow. To direct the body's natural power toward specific ends. The implication staggered Jon. You're saying I can control how my bones grow? With years of practice, yes. You can make them denser. Harder. More resilient. You can heal injuries that would cripple others. You can slow the decay of age. Feng set his hand down, lifted his teacup. The masters of the golden marrow art have bones like iron. They can take blows that would shatter ordinary skeletons and walk away unharmed. Is that how you move the way you do? How you appeared without sound that first day? A ghost of a smile crossed Feng's weathered face the first time Jon had seen anything like humor from the stone tiger. Among other things, the golden light is only the foundation. What you build upon it depends on your nature, your training, your purpose. And my breathing techniques will be transformed. When your skeleton is truly a golden frame, it will be able to channel power that would have destroyed you before. The techniques you glimpsed in the training yard, they will become reliable, sustainable, truly yours. Jon thought of those 3 seconds. The twin swords moving like extensions of his will. The impossible speed, the perfect balance, the feeling of being exactly what he was meant to be. That could be mine. Really mine. Not a glimpse, not a moment, a permanent state. How long? Years. Perhaps many years. The golden frame is not achieved quickly. Feng sipped his tea. But you have made a beginning. That is more than most can say. The following days, Jon practiced the visualization. Golden light, pooling in bones, filling the spaces where marrow lived. He sat in meditation and imagined the warmth spreading through his skeleton, gentle as morning sun, patient as growing things. Sometimes it worked. The warmth came, faint but present, and he held it for as long as he could, minutes at first, then longer as his focus improved. Sometimes it didn't. The images remained images, disconnected from sensation, pretty pictures with no power. He would sit for hours and feel nothing but his own frustration. He began to notice patterns. The visualization worked better in the morning, when his mind was fresh and unburdened by the day's accumulation of thought and effort. It worked better after the breathing exercises, when his body was calm and his awareness was already turned inward. It worked better when he wasn't trying too hard, when he allowed the golden light to come rather than forcing it into existence. Feng's lesson again. Stillness cannot be forced. Neither can growth. Week 9. A breakthrough. Jon sat in morning meditation, the golden light visualization running like a familiar song. He'd found his bones easily, felt them solid and present within his flesh. The warmth was there in his right hand, as usual, faint but real, a small sun burning in his palm, gentle and patient. He breathed. Aloud. Didn't force. And something shifted. The warmth spread. Flowed up his arm like water finding channels in stone. Into his shoulder. Across his chest. Down his spine and out through his legs. For a moment, just a moment, his entire skeleton glowed in his inner vision, suffused with golden light. He was a frame of fire. A structure of warmth. His bones weren't just felt, they were alive, responsive, waiting for instruction. He gasped. The sensation broke. The light vanished like a dream upon waking. But it had been there. Complete. Whole. The golden frame, glimpsed if not grasped. Jon opened his eyes. His hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from the intensity of what he'd felt. His heart pounded. His breath came fast. That was. The golden frame glimpsed, not yet grasped. Feng's voice came from nearby. He'd been watching, as always. You saw what you might become. It was incredible. Like being, more present. More real. More alive. It was a shadow of what's possible. A promise, not a fulfillment. The masters can hold that state for hours. Days. Eventually, it becomes permanent. The golden frame no longer a visualization but a transformation. Bones that are truly golden, in their properties if not their color. How long until I can hold it? Months more. Perhaps longer. Feng paused, something shifting in his ancient eyes. But you've proven you can reach it. That is more than most achieve in their first year. Some students never feel the complete frame, no matter how long they train. Jon looked at his hands. They seemed the same as always, pale, scarred, unremarkable. But he knew now what they contained. What they could become. The golden frame. The foundation for everything I want to be. I can do this. I will do this. Jon. A monk appeared at Jon's door after evening meditation. The man was silent as always, but he carried something Jon hadn't expected, a scroll, sealed with wax. The seal was unfamiliar, not the stone tiger's mark, not any symbol Jon recognized from the monastery. From the flatlands, the monk said, his voice unused and rusty. Master Feng has permitted correspondence during this stage. Jon took the scroll. His heart beat faster. Mei Ling. He waited until the monk had gone, until he was alone in his cell with only a single candle for light. Then he broke the seal. Mei Ling's handwriting sprawled across the paper, bold, slightly uneven, impatient even in ink. He could hear her voice in the words, could picture her face as she wrote them. Jon. Ji says Feng might allow letters now, so I'm sending this whether he allows it or not. If you don't receive it, I'll know who to blame. The fortress is the same. The garden is the same. Everything is the same except you're not here, which makes it all feel different. Emptier. I go to our bench sometimes and pretend you're sitting beside me. Don't tell anyone I said that. Sun Cao has been helping me with sword forms. I think he feels guilty about something, though he'd never admit it. He asks about you sometimes. Tries to make it sound casual. He's very bad at casual. Father had a victory on the western border. Everyone celebrated, but he looked tired. I don't think winning feels like winning to him anymore. There's always another battle, another council, another problem that needs solving. I worry about him, even though worrying doesn't help. The twin swords are still wrapped in silk. Still waiting. I check on them every night before I sleep. I don't know why. It just feels important. Like if I stop checking, something bad will happen. I hope the training is going well. I hope you're eating enough. I hope you're not pushing too hard, but I know you are, because you're you. Write back. Tell me everything. Or tell me nothing, if you can't. Just write back. Mei Ling. P.S. I beat Sun Cao in a spar last week. He claims he let me win. He didn't. Jon read the letter 3 times. Then a 4th. Then he held it against his chest like something precious, like the jade wolf pendant she'd given him. She was real. She was waiting. She was growing and changing and living, down below the mountain, in the world he would return to. He found paper in his cell, rough, simple, meant for notes rather than letters. He found ink. A brush that felt clumsy in his fingers after weeks of holding nothing but stillness. He wrote. Mei Ling. I received your letter. Feng allowed it. I think he's going soft in his old age. Don't tell him I said that. The training is different now. Less pain, more stillness. I'm learning to feel my bones, to guide their growth. It sounds strange written down. It feels strange too. The hardest part is sitting still. You'd laugh if you saw me. Hours of meditation, trying not to think about moving, thinking about moving the entire time. Feng says my survival instincts work against me, that I've trained myself to believe stillness is death. He's right. I'm trying to unlearn it. But there's progress. I felt something last week, the whole technique, working the way it's supposed to. Just for a moment. Feng says I'm doing well, which means I'm probably doing adequately, because Feng doesn't compliment anyone. Tell Sun Cao I'm working on my left shoulder. He'll know what it means. Take care of the swords. Take care of yourself. I'll be back when I can, not as soon as I want, but as soon as Feng allows. You're the reason I can sit still at all. When my mind wanders during meditation, it wanders to you. The garden. Our bench. I think of you, and the stillness doesn't feel so much like death. Don't tell Feng that either. Jon. He gave the letter to the monk who had brought Mei Ling's. The man took it without comment, disappearing into the monastery's depths with footsteps that made no sound. Jon stood in the doorway of his cell, looking out at the mountain night. Stars burned cold and bright above the peaks. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant snow. A thread. Thin but real. Connecting me to the world below. She's waiting. She writes to me. She beat Sun Cao in a spar. Jon smiled in the darkness. I'd better hurry. She'll be better than me by the time I get back. Sleep came easier than it had in weeks. The golden light visualization ran through his mind as he drifted off, warmth spreading through imagined bones. He pictured the frame complete, glowing, and powerful. Somewhere below the mountain, a girl with dark hair was probably reading his letter by candlelight, smiling at his terrible handwriting. We're connected. Even here. Even now. That has to be enough. Chapter 17, The Marrow Refinement Part 2. Jon. 3 months into the training, the rhythm had become as natural as breathing. Jon woke before the bell, now his body anticipating the dawn meditation the way it had once anticipated danger. The thin mat beneath him, the cold stone walls, the particular quality of pre-dawn silence, all of it had become home in a way the monastery never was during the bone washing. Then, he had been enduring. Now, he was becoming. The golden light came more easily with each passing week. Not effortlessly, nothing with Feng was effortless, but reliably. Jon could find his bone sense within 3 breaths, could summon the visualization within 10, and could hold the warmth for minutes at a time. The skeleton that had been invisible to his inner awareness now glowed in his mind's eye, a framework of golden fire that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. Subtle changes accumulated, too small to notice day by day but undeniable when he paused to take stock. His posture had shifted. He stood differently and sat differently, rooted in ways he hadn't been before. When he walked, his feet seemed to know the ground beneath them, to feel it through the leather of his boots. The nervous energy that had always hummed beneath his skin had quieted, replaced by something steadier. His hands were certain. Not just healed, but confident. When he reached for something, his fingers closed without hesitation, without the ghost of trembling that had haunted him since the slave pits. The hands that had betrayed him in the training yard now felt like they belonged to him completely. His breathing had deepened. Not the explosive power of his techniques, he still couldn't safely use those, but the slow, patient breath of cultivation. Each inhale drew air to the bottom of his lungs. Each exhale released tension he'd forgotten he was holding. Master Ji would have approved. I'm becoming what Feng is, Jon realized one morning as he sat in meditation, the golden light steady within his bones. Slowly. Incompletely. But becoming. Letters flowed between mountain and fortress now, not frequently, but steadily. Every 2 weeks, sometimes 3, a monk would appear at Jon's door with a scroll bearing Mei Ling's bold, impatient handwriting. She told him about the fortress. Sun Cao continued sword lessons, grudging but genuine. He'd stopped claiming she let him win, which Mei Ling interpreted as progress. Ji's health was declining slightly, though the old scholar wouldn't admit it, his steps slower in the mornings, his cough more persistent. The political situation was tense and growing tenser as the tournament approached and the great houses jockeyed for position. Her father, distant as ever, consumed by war councils and border skirmishes. And smaller things, too. Personal things that made Jon smile in the solitude of his cell. A cat has taken up residence in the garden. Orange and white, with one torn ear. I've named him Ghost because he appears without warning and vanishes when you try to touch him. Also because I thought you'd appreciate the irony of naming a cat after a wolf. I'm reading a book about the history of the internal arts. Most of it is incomprehensible meridians and chi flows and cultivation stages. But there's a chapter about the Stone Tiger Monastery that mentions a trial of silence lasting 3 years. Please tell me Feng isn't planning to make you do that. I had a dream where you returned with golden bones that glowed through your skin. You looked ridiculous, like a lantern shaped like a person. I woke up laughing. Jon wrote back. Told her about the training, what he could put into words, which wasn't much. The golden light defied description, it had to be felt to be understood. He told her about the monastery's rhythms, the monks who'd become familiar faces if not friends, and the view from the eastern terrace at sunset when the mountains turned to fire and shadow. And other things. Things he wouldn't have admitted to anyone else. I'm learning to be still. It's harder than any of Feng's exercises, harder than the basins, harder than the pain. But I'm learning. The stillness isn't death anymore. It used to feel like dying, like being prey, like waiting for something terrible to find me. Now it feels like rest. Like the moment between breaths. Like the gods would at Winterfell, before everything went wrong. Feng says the mind should be empty during meditation. Mine isn't. It's full of you. I haven't told him that. I think he knows anyway. In the 5th month, Feng summoned Jon to the eastern terrace for assessment. Show me. Jon sat. Closed his eyes. Found his bones. The golden light came quickly, warm, bright, filling his skeleton from fingertips to skull. He held it steady, letting it pulse in time with his heartbeat, feeling the structure of his body from within. The rebuilt architecture that the bone washing had created was now strengthening under the marrow refinement's patient cultivation. 1 minute. 2. 5. When he opened his eyes, Feng was watching with something that might have been satisfaction. On anyone else, the expression would have been unmistakable approval. On Feng, it was merely the absence of disapproval. The visualization is strong. The cultivation is progressing. Am I ready? To try the breathing techniques? No. Jon's heart sank, though he'd expected the answer. He'd been asking the same question for weeks, receiving the same response. The golden light must be more than visualization, Feng continued, his voice patient but unyielding. It must become reality. Your bones must actually change, not just feel different, but be different. The density must increase. The structure must strengthen. What you're doing now is preparing the ground. The transformation itself takes time. How long? 3 more months. Perhaps 4. If you continue at this pace. 3 months ago, this answer would have frustrated Jon. Would have felt like failure, like delay, like time stolen from his real training. He would have wanted to argue, to push, to force the process faster. Now, he simply nodded. Then I'll continue. Feng studied him for a long moment, those black eyes seeing more than Jon was comfortable revealing. You've learned something. What? Patience. The hardest lesson for someone like you. It wasn't quite praise. But from Feng, it was close. Jon. The problem started small. A morning meditation that didn't quite work. The golden light came, but dimmer than usual. Harder to hold. The visualization that had been flowing smoothly for weeks now felt forced, like trying to remember a dream that was slipping away. Jon dismissed it. Everyone had off days. Even Feng probably had mornings where the stillness didn't come easily. But the next day was the same. And the next. The golden light that had become second nature now required effort to summon and concentration to maintain. Where before he had simply been the visualization, now he was performing it, and the difference was vast. By the fifth day, Jon could barely find his bone sense at all. His skeleton had become invisible again, hidden beneath flesh and muscle, inaccessible to his inner awareness. The warmth that had filled his bones was gone, replaced by ordinary sensation: skin, muscle, the surface layers that had always been easy to feel. What's happening? What did I do wrong? He pushed harder. Sat longer. Tried to force the connection that had been flowing naturally just a week ago. He stayed in meditation until his legs cramped and his back ached, searching for the golden light with increasing desperation. Nothing worked. The harder he tried, the further the light retreated. Each failed session fed his frustration, and the frustration made the next session harder. A spiral, tightening with each turn. I was doing so well. What changed? Feng found him in the eastern courtyard after another failed morning session. Jon sat with his head in his hands, the picture of defeat. His robes were damp with morning mist. His fingers were cold. The visualization that had been his constant companion for months was gone, and he had no idea how to get it back. You're struggling. Jon looked up. Feng stood nearby, hands clasped behind his back, expression unreadable. I can't find it anymore. The light. The feeling. It's gone. It's not gone. You've pushed it away. Pushed it away? I've been trying to find it for days. Trying is the problem. Feng sat across from Jon unusual. He normally stood during instruction, maintaining the distance between teacher and student. This felt different. More intimate. Tell me what you've been thinking. During meditation. About the technique. About doing it right. About not failing. And before? When was it working? Jon thought back. The sessions that had flowed. The golden light that had come easily, naturally, without struggle. I wasn't thinking about the technique. I was just doing it. Or not doing it. Being it. And now you're thinking about it. Yes. That is the problem. Feng's voice shifted, taking on the quality it had during evening sessions when he taught philosophy rather than technique. There is a stage in every student's development where progress becomes its own obstacle. You achieved something real: the golden light, steady and strong. You could hold it for minutes. You could summon it at will. And then, you became attached to that achievement. Attached to the feeling of progress. Attached to the idea of yourself as someone who had mastered this much. I don't understand. You started protecting it. Monitoring it. Checking to see if it was still there. Feng picked up a pebble from the ground and held it loosely in his palm. If I hold this loosely, it stays. I can feel it, move it, work with it. He closed his fist around the stone, squeezing hard. If I grip it too tightly. The pebble shot from his grasp, pressure finding the gaps between his fingers, skittering across the stone courtyard. The same is true of mastery. Hold it too tightly, and it escapes. The more you try to protect your progress, the more surely you destroy it. Jon stared at the pebble, lying motionless several feet away. The lesson was clear, devastatingly clear. I was afraid of losing it. So I held too tight. And lost it anyway. What do I do? Stop trying to do. Stop monitoring your progress. Stop protecting what you've achieved. Just let go. Yes. Trust that what you've built will remain. The foundation doesn't disappear because you're not watching it. The golden light doesn't vanish because you're not checking every moment to see if it's still there. He rose, brushing dust from his robes. This is perhaps the hardest lesson I can teach you. Harder than stillness. Harder than patience. The lesson of letting go. Jon. Letting go was harder than the initial learning. Harder than sitting still when every instinct screamed to move. Harder than the basins, in its way. Jon sat. Breathed. Tried not to try. Don't check. Don't monitor. Don't. He was monitoring again. Checking to see if he was not checking. The harder he tried to let go, the more tightly he held on. This is impossible. Days passed. A week. 2 weeks. Jon sat in meditation and felt nothing but his own frustration, his own desperate wanting, and his own need to reclaim what he'd lost. The golden light remained beyond his reach, glimpsed occasionally but never grasped, vanishing the moment he became aware of it. He began to understand Feng's lesson in a different way. Not as instruction, but as truth. He could feel the grasping, could feel how his mind clutched at any glimmer of progress, how his awareness pounced on the faintest hint of golden light and immediately smothered it with attention. I'm my own enemy here. The harder I fight, the more surely I lose. But knowing didn't help. Understanding didn't translate into release. The third week, something shifted. Jon wasn't sure when it happened. One moment he was sitting, breathing, failing to not try. The next, he was just sitting. Breathing. Being. No effort. No monitoring. No checking to see if the golden light had returned. Just presence. Just now. Just this breath, this moment, this body sitting on cold stone. And the golden light was there. Not because he'd summoned it. Not because he'd done anything at all. Because it had never left. It was there the whole time, he realized with a shock that nearly broke the connection. I just couldn't see it because I was looking too hard. He held the awareness loosely this time. Didn't grasp. Didn't protect. Just noticed, the way you notice the sound of wind or the feel of sunlight. The golden light remained. You found it again. Feng's voice came from nearby. Jon opened his eyes slowly, reluctant to break the connection, then caught himself. That reluctance was itself a form of grasping. He let the visualization fade naturally, without clinging. I stopped looking for it. Yes. Feng's voice held something almost like approval. That is the deepest lesson of the internal arts. The harder you grasp, the less you hold. The more you surrender, the more you receive. It doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. You simply haven't lived long enough to see it yet. Jon considered this. The paradox of effort and release. The way forcing had destroyed what allowing had created. Is this why the external arts don't work for me? Because I was grasping too hard? Partially. Your techniques generate enormous power, but power without foundation is destruction. You were trying to force your body to do what it wasn't ready to do, grasping at abilities your skeleton couldn't support. And now? Now you're building the foundation. When it's complete, the power will flow through you instead of destroying you. Not because you're stronger in the conventional sense, but because you're more open. Less resistant. The current flows around stones, but it flows through empty channels. A letter arrived during the recovery weeks, at exactly the right moment. Jon. I had a terrible week. Father left for the front without saying goodbye. Just gone one morning, with a note that said he'd return when he could. Ji says that's how military families work. I told Ji that doesn't make it hurt less. Then I tried to help a servant with a heavy load and dropped it. Broke 3 vases. Everyone was very polite about it, which made it worse. I could see them thinking the general's clumsy daughter behind their smiles. Then I went to the garden to feel sorry for myself, and I thought about you on your mountain, sitting still for hours, trying to feel your bones or whatever it is you're doing. And I thought, if Jon can learn to be still, I can learn to let things go. I don't know if that makes sense. But it helped. Right back. Tell me something that helps. Mei Ling. Jon read the letter 3 times. Then he wrote his response, the brush moving slowly as he chose each word. Mei Ling. It makes perfect sense. I had a setback too. Lost something I thought I'd gained. Spent weeks trying to get it back, failing, and making it worse by trying. Feng told me I was holding too tightly. That mastery escapes when you grip it. I didn't understand until I did. I think maybe the same is true for other things. People. Moments. The things we love. We hold them loosely, and they stay. We grip too hard, and they slip away. Your father will come back. He always does. And when he does, maybe you can hold him loosely too. Let him be what he is, a general, a father, a man who doesn't know how to say goodbye. Don't try to make him something he isn't. Just let him be what he is, and love that. I'm learning to hold things loosely. The training. The progress. Even you. Not because I don't care. Because I care too much to crush what we have by gripping too tight. Right back. I'll keep writing as long as you do. Jon. Jon. Feng's examination in the 7th month was the most thorough yet. The old master spent an hour testing Jon's bones, pressing against joints, probing along limbs, and having Jon hold positions that stressed different parts of his skeleton. Each test was assessed with that unreadable expression, each result noted in some internal ledger that Feng never shared. Finally, he stepped back. The marrow refinement is nearly complete. Your bones have changed, not just healed, but transformed. The density is remarkable for your age. The structure is sound. Jon waited. There was always more with Feng. You are ready to try the breathing techniques again. His heart stopped. Started. Pounded against his ribs with sudden, fierce hope. Really? At minimal power. Controlled conditions. If anything feels wrong, any strain, any pain, any sense that your body is fighting itself, you stop immediately. I understand. We begin tomorrow. The Eastern Terrace at dawn. The same place Jon had spoken his truth nearly a year ago, had revealed his reasons for seeking strength, and had earned Feng's acceptance. The sun rose behind the mountains, painting everything gold: the stone beneath his feet, the ancient pines, and the mist that curled through the valleys below. Jon stood in the center of the terrace, his rebuilt body humming with nervous energy. Feng watched from nearby, his posture relaxed but his attention absolute. 2 monks stood at the terrace's edge, ready to intervene if something went wrong. Begin with water breathing. The calmest form. Minimal enhancement. Jon closed his eyes. Found his center. For the first time in almost a year, he reached for water breathing. The technique answered. It was different than before. Not the flood of power that had overwhelmed him in the training yard, the surge that had felt like drowning in his own strength. This was steadier. Gentler. Like a river that knew its banks, that flowed within its channel instead of breaking through. The enhancement spread through him. His senses sharpened: the morning air grew crisp with detail, each scent distinct, each sound clear. His body responded with fluid grace, ready to move in any direction without hesitation. And his bones, his rebuilt, transformed bones held. No cramp. No pain. No grinding protest from damaged structure. Just power, contained and controlled. It's working. The training is working. I'm not breaking. Over the following days, Feng had Jon test each technique at increasing intensity. Water breathing first, again and again, until Jon could summon it without thinking and could hold it for minutes at a time. The calm enhancement became familiar, comfortable, like wearing clothes that finally fit. Then thunder breathing. The first spark of lightning in his limbs, energy crackling through channels that had once been too narrow to contain it. His ribs held. His spine channeled the force instead of cracking. The power flowed through his golden frame instead of shattering it. Then beast breathing. Senses heightening, awareness expanding until he could hear heartbeats and smell emotions. His skull didn't ache. His eyes didn't blur. The enhancement that had once threatened to burn out his mind now settled into place like a key into a lock. Full integration, Feng said on the 7th day. All three together. The combination that broke you in the training yard. Jon's stomach tightened. The memory of that day, the 3 seconds of glory, the collapse, the flashback remained sharp despite the months of training. I'm ready. He closed his eyes. Reached for everything at once. Water, thunder, beast. Layered enhancement, the techniques flowing together like rivers joining into a single current. The power flooded through him. And his body held. His foundation held. He moved through a basic form, swords of air cutting patterns around him. His bones sang with contained strength. His flesh channeled forces that would have destroyed him a year ago. The techniques that had broken him now worked for him, supported by the architecture the golden marrow art had built. When he stopped, breathing hard but unbroken, Feng was watching with an expression Jon had never seen before. Something very close to pride. You felt it working. Good. But understand, this is not completion. This is the beginning of integration. Jon nodded, still catching his breath. The demonstration had taken more out of him than he'd expected, not because his body was failing, but because the power itself was exhausting to channel, even with proper support. What do you mean? Your bones can support the techniques now. But supporting and enhancing are different things. The true fusion internal and external arts working as one, each strengthening the other requires the next stage. Jade transformation. Yes. That is years away. Perhaps many years. Feng's voice held no judgment, only fact. For now, you can use your techniques without destroying yourself. That is significant progress. But do not mistake progress for mastery. Jon understood. The door had opened, but the journey beyond it was long. I'm not ready for the tournament. No. Not this tournament. But perhaps the next one. Or the one after. The Festival of Crossed Swords occurs twice yearly. You have time. How long until Jade transformation? That depends on many things. Your continued practice. Your integration of what you've learned. Your reasons for seeking strength. Feng's eyes sharpened. Those must remain clear. Obsession leads to grasping. Grasping leads to failure. You've learned that lesson once. Don't forget it. Jon. The announcement came during an evening session, the sun setting behind the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The marrow refinement is complete. Jon looked up from his meditation. Feng stood in the doorway of his cell, silhouetted against the fading light. Complete? You said 3 more months. I said 3 months at your current pace. You accelerated after the setback. The struggle taught you something the smooth path couldn't. Feng entered the cell, his footsteps silent on the stone floor. Your bones are transformed. Your marrow cultivates the golden light naturally now, without constant focus it continues even when you're not meditating, strengthening you while you sleep. Your skeleton is the skeleton of someone 20 years into internal arts training, not 1 year. A pause. You have talent. More than I expected. More than I wanted to admit. The warning came next, as Jon knew it would. But talent is not mastery. Remember what I said, you can use your techniques without self-destruction. That is not the same as using them well. I understand. Do you? Feng's eyes were sharp. You glimpsed the golden frame during your training. You can reach it sometimes, in deep meditation. But you cannot hold it in combat. Cannot maintain it under pressure. That requires the integration that only comes with jade transformation. And that requires years. Years of continued practice. Years of returning here, learning, and growing. The path doesn't end because one stage is complete. Jon met Feng's eyes directly. I'll come back. As many times as it takes. I know you will. Something shifted in the old master's expression, a softening that Jon had never seen before. You've done well, Jon Snow. Better than I expected. Better than you expected. I had a good teacher. You had a demanding teacher. The goodness came from you. Feng reached into his robe and withdrew something small. A stone, smooth and pale, sized to fit in a palm. He held it out to Jon. This is a meditation stone from the monastery's deepest chamber. It has been used by masters for generations. The stone holds something of their practice, not power, exactly, but resonance. It will help you maintain the connection when you're away from the mountain. Jon took it. The stone was warm not from Feng's body heat, but from something within. A gentle pulse, barely perceptible, like a heartbeat. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say nothing. Just use it well. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Jon packed his meager belongings. The jade wolf pendant, warm against his chest. The meditation stone, wrapped in cloth and tucked into his pack. A change of clothes, worn soft from months of use. The monastery gate stood open. The mountain road descended before him, familiar now, almost friendly. He knew every switchback, every treacherous step, and every place where the view opened up to reveal the world below. Feng stood at the gate, hands clasped behind his back, the same posture he'd held when Jon first arrived, desperate, broken, chasing a dead man's legend. Return when you're ready for the next stage. Or return when you need guidance. The mountain doesn't move. I'll return. I know. A pause. Something almost like warmth in Feng's ancient eyes. Travel safely, Jon Snow. The world below is less patient than the mountain. I've survived the world before. Yes. But you were merely surviving then. Now you have something to lose. The words stayed with Jon as he walked through the gate, as the stone steps descended before him. Something to lose. Mei Ling. The swords. The life waiting for him at Tianli. He's right. I have more to lose now. More to protect. That's what makes me stronger. Not weaker. The monastery shrank behind him as he descended. The mountain cold gave way to warmer air. The world below emerged from the mist green and gold with late summer, alive and waiting. 8 months. Bone washing and marrow refinement. 2 stages complete, and with them, a transformation that went deeper than bone. He had learned stillness. Learned patience. Learned to hold loosely what he loved. Jade transformation waited. Years of training waited. But first, Mei Ling. The garden. The twin swords were wrapped in wolf-embroidered silk. First, home. Somewhere in that world, a girl with dark hair was probably looking at the road, wondering when he would appear. A scholar was probably preparing assessments and updates. An unlikely rival was probably practicing forms, waiting to see how much Jon had improved. Soon, Jon thought, touching the jade wolf through his shirt. Very soon. Wait for me. I'm coming. The road descended. Jon descended with it. Behind him, the Stone Tiger's monastery disappeared into the mist, patient, eternal, waiting for his return. Ahead, the world waited too. He was ready to meet it. End of Chapter 16, Part 2. Chapter 18, The Sword and the Stone, Part 1. Jon. The road to Tianli was familiar now. Jon had travelled it twice before, once fleeing toward the mountain and once returning from it. But this time, everything looked different. Not because the landscape had changed. The terraced fields still cascaded down the hillsides in patterns that had been ancient when the first Starks ruled Winterfell. The distant mountains still rose in blue-grey waves against the horizon. The fortress still dominated the plains ahead, grey stone walls and curved roofs catching the afternoon light. The difference was in Jon. He saw more clearly. Feng's training had sharpened not just his techniques but also his awareness, the way he read terrain, noted details, and processed the world around him. The farmers in the distant fields, bent over their work, he could count them, assess their health by their posture, and estimate the crop yield by the color of the plants they tended. The merchants on the road ahead, their carts laden with goods, he registered the weight distribution, the quality of their horses, and the subtle tension that said they'd passed through dangerous territory recently. The guards on the distant walls, he could see them now, small figures against the grey stone. 3 on the eastern tower. 2 walking the northern wall. 1 stationary near the main gate, probably the watch commander. I used to stumble through the world half blind. Now I see. His body moved differently too. The walking meditation Feng had taught him had become second nature, each step rooted, each breath drawing something from the earth beneath him. He didn't tire the way he used to. The journey that had exhausted him a year ago now felt almost restful, his legs carrying him forward with the steady rhythm of a river finding its path. The meditation stone pulsed gently in his pack, a warm presence against his spine. Feng's gift. A reminder of the mountain behind him and the training still to come. 10 months. Bone washing and marrow refinement. 2 stages complete, and with them, a transformation that went deeper than flesh and bone. I'm not the boy who left. I'm not sure what I am now. But I'm going to find out. The guards at the gate recognized him immediately this time. No hesitation, no second looks, no whispered consultations about whether to admit the strange foreign boy with the white hair. Jon Snow. You've returned. The words carried, and Jon could see the information spreading, guards signaling to each other with quick hand gestures, a runner disappearing into the fortress's depths. By the time he reached the main gate, a small crowd had gathered in the courtyard beyond. Servants and soldiers, officials and household members, all finding reasons to be present when the Stone Tiger's student arrived. The whispers reached his enhanced hearing before he passed through the gate. The Stone Tiger's student. Completed 2 stages, they say. Look how he walks, like he's made of mountain stone. Still looks like a ghost, that hair. Different whispers than before. A year ago, they'd called him cursed and white devil. The fear hadn't entirely vanished, he could hear it threading through some of the voices, the wariness that came from strangeness. But it was mixed with something else now. Respect, perhaps. Or at least curiosity. Let them whisper. I've earned whatever they say. Jon scanned the crowd as he entered the courtyard, his eyes moving automatically, cataloging faces. Servants he recognized, guards he'd sparred with during his first stay, and household officials who'd watched his collapse in the training yard. Mei Ling wasn't there. A flicker of disappointment moved through him. He'd imagined her waiting at the gate, the way she'd waited after the bone washing. Running toward him, crashing into his arms, her fierce voice telling him he'd taken too long. But no. The crowd was servants and soldiers and curious onlookers. No dark hair. No fierce eyes. Master Ji emerged from the gathered people, moving more slowly than Jon remembered. His robes hung looser on his frame, he'd lost weight. And his breathing was wrong, a subtle wheeze beneath each inhale that spoke of lungs that weren't working as they should. He's worse. The decline Mei Ling mentioned in her letters, it's worse than she said. You've changed. Ji's voice was the same, at least sharp and assessing, the scholar's mind still keen even as the body failed. The training. Not just the training. Something else. The old man studied Jon with the clinical attention he brought to ancient texts and strategic analyses. You're not the boy who left. You're something else now. Someone else. Is that good? That depends entirely on what you do with it. Jon accepted the non-answer. Ji had never been one for simple judgments. Where's Mei Ling? Something complicated moved behind Xi's eyes. Concern, perhaps, or calculation. The garden. She's been there since dawn. Waiting. Then why didn't she come to the gate? She wanted to see you alone first. Before the crowds and the questions and the politics. Politics. Much has changed while you were gone, Jon Snow. The general has plans. The tournament approaches. There are things you need to know. He gestured toward the garden path, the movement slow and careful, conserving energy. But that can wait an hour. Go to her. She's been counting the days. Jon. The path to their garden was worn smooth by familiar feet, his own, Mei Ling's, and the countless journeys they'd made together during his first months at Tianli. Jon walked it now with a different awareness, noting how the stones had settled, which plants had grown, and the small changes that accumulated over seasons. The cherry trees had lost their leaves. It's autumn now, not summer. The branches are bare against the grey sky, waiting for winter. The bench sat in dappled shadow, and on it, Mei Ling. She'd changed too. The difference struck Jon like a physical blow, stopping him at the garden's edge. Taller, she must have grown 3 inches while he was gone. Her face had lost more of its childhood softness, the lines of her jaw and cheekbones sharper and more defined. The girl who'd pulled him from the beach was becoming someone else. A young woman, almost. Someone who would command attention when she entered rooms. She was holding something in her lap. A bundle wrapped in blue silk, embroidered with silver wolves running in an endless circle. The swords. She brought the swords. Jon's heart clenched. He hadn't asked her to bring them. He hadn't known what he'd feel when he saw them again, the twin practice blades he'd carved himself, the physical manifestation of his Arthur Dane dream, the weapons that had been in his hands when everything fell apart. She looked up. Her eyes found his across the garden. Neither of them moved. 8 months of letters. 8 months of distance and longing and growing up separately. 8 months compressed into a single moment of recognition, of seeing and being seen. You're taller. Her voice was steady, but Jon could see her hands trembling on the silk-wrapped bundle. The small movement that betrayed the calm facade. So are you. And you walk differently. Like you're made of stone and lightning. Is that good? I don't know yet. A ghost of her old smile crossed her face. Come here and let me decide. Jon crossed the garden. Each step felt significant, the closing of distance that had stretched between them for nearly a year. He was aware of everything, the crunch of gravel beneath his feet, the cool autumn air against his skin, and the way her eyes tracked his movement, assessing, cataloguing, and hungry for details. He stopped in front of the bench. Looking down at her. She is looking up at him. Hello, Mei Ling. Hello, Jon. She stood. Set the silk bundle carefully on the bench. This time, she didn't crash into him. Didn't run. She stepped forward deliberately, closed the distance between them with intention rather than impulse, and slid her arms around him. Jon held her back. It was different from the desperate embrace of his first return. Quieter. Deeper. The arms that wrapped around him were stronger than they'd been. She'd been training, he could feel it in the muscle beneath her sleeves. And the way she held him wasn't the clinging grip of a child afraid of loss. It was the embrace of someone who had learned, as he had, that holding too tightly made things slip away. 8 months. I know. I read your letters so many times the paper started to wear through. I read yours until I had them memorized. She laughed against his chest, a small sound, surprised out of her. Then you know all my embarrassing complaints. The broken vases. The arguments with father. I know you beat Sun Cao in a spar, and he still claims he let you win. He's gotten worse about admitting defeat. I think it's because I'm actually challenging him now. She stepped back, hands still on his arms, studying him with the intensity she brought to everything she cared about. You're really different. Not just standing different inside. I can see it. The training changes things. Not just the training. Her eyes were knowing, seeing more than he was comfortable with. You wrote about holding loosely. About letting go. I could feel you changing through the letters, each one a little different from the last. I could feel you changing too. She turned, picked up the silk bundle, and held it out to him. I brought these. I thought maybe you'd want to see them. Jon took the bundle. The weight was familiar, 2 wooden practice swords, carved by his own hands more than a year ago in pre-dawn darkness behind the stable. The silk wrapping was new, Mei Ling's edition, the wolves her design, running forever in their embroidered circle. Do you want them back? The question hung in the air. The twin swords. Arthur Dane's shadow. The dream that had consumed him, that had broken him, that had driven him up the mountain to Feng's monastery. I don't know yet. He sat on the bench. She sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. I can use the breathing techniques now. Safely. My body holds. He turned the bundle over in his hands, feeling the shapes within the silk. But Feng said, I'm not ready for combat, not real combat. Supporting the techniques is different from fighting with them. So, not yet. Not yet. But closer than I was. He unwrapped the silk carefully, revealing the wooden blades. They looked the same as he remembered, rough carved, uneven, the work of a child's hands trying to capture something too large for them to grasp. But they felt different in his grip. Lighter, somehow. Or maybe his hands were simply stronger. He didn't swing them. Didn't practice any forms. Just held them, one in each hand, feeling their weight, remembering the boy who had made them. That boy is gone. The dream remains. But it's my dream now, not Arthur Dane's shadow. He wrapped them again, carefully, the silver wolves gleaming in the autumn light. Keep them. For now. Until I know I won't break again. Mei Ling nodded. Took the bundle back, held it against her chest the way she had a year ago, when he'd first entrusted it to her keeping. I'll keep them safe. Like always. I know you will. They talked. Hours of letters compressed into spoken words, the things that hadn't fit in writing, the nuances that couldn't be captured in ink. Mei Ling's father had returned from the front briefly, between campaigns. He'd noticed her for the first time in months. Asked about her training. It wasn't much, but it was something. A crack in the wall between them, wide enough to let light through. Sun Cao had become a genuine training partner, not just a reluctant instructor. Something had shifted in him while Jon was gone. Mei Ling didn't know what, but she'd seen it. He treated her differently now. Treated the household differently. As if some old wound had finally started to heal. The political situation was worse. Houses falling, alliances shifting, the great families of Yi circling each other like wolves waiting for weakness. The tournament, the festival of crossed swords, had become more important than ever, a way of demonstrating strength without open warfare, of sending messages that couldn't be conveyed through diplomacy. And Ji's health was failing faster than anyone would admit. The cough that had been occasional was now constant. The steps that had been slow were now labored. Mei Ling didn't say it directly, but Jon could read it in her voice. She was afraid of losing him. Jon shared his own news. The setback and recovery, the terrible weeks when he'd lost the golden light, the lesson of holding loosely that had finally let him find it again. The integration of breathing techniques, the first time he'd used them without breaking, and the careful escalation as Feng tested each technique in turn. The gift of the meditation stone. The knowledge that jade transformation still waited, years away, but the path was clearer now than it had ever been. What they didn't say, but both felt, the relationship had deepened beyond friendship. Not romance, exactly, they were still too young for that, still too uncertain of what they were becoming. But something more than it had been. Something that would grow as they did. We're bound together, Jon thought, watching her face as she spoke. However this ends, that won't change. Jon. The Great Hall was different at night. Jon had eaten here before, during his first stay meals at the lower tables, watching the household's rhythms from the edges. He'd never sat at the high table. Never been acknowledged as anything more than a curiosity, a guest whose presence was tolerated rather than celebrated. Tonight, General Kai sat in the central seat. Watching. Waiting. The general was smaller than Jon remembered, or perhaps Jon had grown. But there was nothing small about his presence. Kai commanded the room without speaking and drew attention without demanding it. The way he held himself, the way his eyes moved, the subtle weight of authority that surrounded him like armor. This is what power looks like, Jon thought as he entered the hall. Not size or strength. Certainty. The absolute knowledge that you belong exactly where you are. Conversations paused as Jon walked through the hall. Eyes tracked him, whispers following in his wake. He ignored them. The stillness training had given him that, at least the ability to be watched without feeling hunted, to move through attention without drowning in it. A servant appeared at his elbow. The general requests your presence at the high table. Jon looked up. Kai was watching him directly now, expression unreadable but attention absolute. Of course. The high table was a place of honor, generals, advisors, and the inner circle of House Kai. Jon climbed the dais, bowed appropriately, and took the seat indicated. The chair was harder than the benches below, the wood carved with symbols he didn't recognize. Mei Ling was already there, seated at her father's right hand. Her eyes found Jon's as he sat, a flicker of warning in them. Be careful, that look said. Something is coming. Master Feng sends regular reports. Kai's voice was calm and measured, the voice of a man who commanded armies and played political games with lives as stakes. He says you've exceeded expectations. Master Feng is generous. Master Feng is never generous. If he says you've exceeded expectations, you've done something remarkable. Kai lifted his cup, sipped, and set it down with precise care. Tell me what you've learned. What could Jon say? How did he summarize a year of transformation, the fire in the basins, the endless meditation, the setback and recovery, the slow accumulation of strength that had remade him from the inside out? I've learned that strength without foundation destroys itself. That power held too tightly escapes. That stillness isn't weakness, it's the ground everything else is built on. Philosophy. Kai's tone wasn't dismissive, exactly, but it demanded more. What about combat? I can use my techniques safely now. Not at full power, Feng says that requires more training. But I won't break myself trying. Demonstrate tomorrow. I want to see what Feng's training has produced. It wasn't a request. Yes, General. Kai's eyes held Jon's for a long moment, assessing, calculating, weighing. The Festival of Crossed Swords approaches. 6 weeks away. Representatives from every major house will compete. Master Ji mentioned it. Did he mention that I intend to send someone unexpected? Jon's stomach tightened. He knew where this was going, had known since Ji first mentioned the tournament, since he'd seen the look in Kai's eyes when he entered the hall. I'm not ready for tournament combat. Feng was clear. Not this tournament. Kai raised a hand, forestalling Jon's objection. But the next one. 6 months from now. That gives you time to continue your training, to integrate what you've learned, and to practice against real opponents instead of air and imagination. And if I'm still not ready in 6 months, then we wait for the one after. I'm patient, Jon Snow. I can afford to be patient with an investment this valuable. Investment. That's what Jon was to Kai, an investment. A resource. A weapon being forged for purposes Jon didn't fully understand. The word sat uncomfortably in his chest, too close to how the slavers had looked at him, how Grazdan had looked at him. But also, an opportunity. A chance to prove himself in ways that mattered. A path toward the strength he'd been building toward all along. I'll be ready. Good. We'll discuss the details after tomorrow's demonstration. Jon. The garden at night was silver and shadow, the bare branches of the cherry trees reaching toward stars that burned cold and distant above. Jon found himself on the familiar path without quite remembering the decision to walk it. The meal had ended. The hall had emptied. But his mind was still churning with everything Kai had said, everything that had been implied. Mei Ling was already on their bench. Of course she was. You're worried. He sat beside her. The stone was cold through his clothes, but he barely noticed. Your father wants me to demonstrate tomorrow. I know. I saw your face when he said it. The last time I demonstrated for an audience, I collapsed. Had a flashback. Proved everyone right who called me cursed. The memory was still sharp, the 3 seconds of glory, the cramping in his hand, the world dissolving into Winterfell, and Theon's sword shattering and Catelyn's face twisted with horror. The humiliation of lying in the sand, shaking, broken. What if it happens again? What if the training wasn't enough? What if I'm still broken underneath? You're not broken. You don't know that. I do know that. Her voice was fierce, the way it had been when she'd defended him against the servants' whispers, when she'd refused to let him quit. I've read your letters. Everyone. I've heard how you write about the training, the setbacks, the recovery, and the things you learned. Broken people don't learn like that. Broken people don't grow. Mei Ling. Tomorrow, when you're in the training yard with everyone watching, don't think about them. Don't think about the last time. She turned to face him, her eyes catching starlight. Think about why you're doing this. Why am I doing this? You tell me. Jon was quiet for a moment. The meditation stone pulsed gently in his pocket. Feng's gift, a connection to the mountain and everything he'd learned there. Why was he doing this? For Kai's approval? For the tournament? For the chance to prove himself to people who'd called him cursed? No. Those weren't the reasons. Those had never been the reasons. For the people I couldn't protect. For the people I might still save. Alia on the cross. Robb in Winterfell. Everyone I've lost and everyone I might still lose. Hold on to that. Mei Ling's voice was soft but certain. Not tightly, loosely. Let it anchor you without trapping you. She took his hand. Her fingers were warm, calloused from sword practice, and strong. I'll be watching. Not judging. Just watching. And whatever happens, I'll still be here afterward. They sat together until the stars wheeled overhead, not speaking much, just present. Two young people on the edge of something neither fully understood, not just the demonstration, but everything that would come after. The tournament. The training. The future unfolded before them like a road through unknown territory. You should sleep. Tomorrow is important. I know. Jon. Yes. I'm proud of you. Whatever happens tomorrow. I'm proud of who you're becoming. Jon walked to his room alone, but not lonely. Mei Ling's words echoed in his mind, mixing with Feng's lessons, with the steady pulse of the meditation stone against his hip. Tomorrow, I prove something. Not to Kai. Not to the fortress. To myself. Jon. The training yard was more crowded than Jon had ever seen it. Morning light slanted across the sand, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. General Kai sat on a raised platform at the yard's edge, surrounded by advisors and officers, men whose names Jon didn't know, whose faces he'd never seen, but whose presence spoke of importance. Master Ji stood nearby with scrolls and brush, ready to record observations. Sun Cao waited at the yard's southern edge, arms crossed, expression unreadable. And Mei Ling, seated beside her father, watching with eyes that saw everything. The servants who'd called him cursed were there too, keeping to the edges of the crowd. Watching to see if the white devil would break again. Jon walked to the center of the yard. The sand shifted under his feet, familiar, weighted with memory. This was where he'd fallen. Where he'd shattered in front of everyone who'd ever doubted him. Where the 3 seconds of glory had collapsed into humiliation and pain. That was then. This is now. I'm not the same person. He found his center. Felt the golden light pulsing gently in his bones, the framework the golden marrow art had built, solid and strong, ready to support what his techniques demanded. The meditation stone hummed against his hip, a reminder of the mountain, of Feng's teachings, of everything he'd survived to reach this moment. Begin when you're ready. Kai's voice, calm and commanding. Jon breathed. Not the explosive breath of his techniques, just air. Just presence. Just now. Then he moved. Water breathing first. The calm foundation, the flowing current that enhanced without overwhelming. Jon moved through basic forms, his body responding with fluid grace. The difference from a year ago was immediately visible: the stability underneath the motion, the roots beneath the river. His feet planted into the sand with each step, not just touching but connecting, drawing strength from the earth itself. The enhancement spread through him, senses sharpening, awareness expanding, and the world becoming clearer and more detailed. He could hear heartbeats in the crowd. Could smell the fierce sweat of servants who remembered his collapse. Could feel the subtle shifts in air pressure as people leaned forward to watch. His body held. No cramping. No strain. Just power, contained and channeled. Thunder breathing next. Speed and force, the lightning that had always been hardest to control. Jon accelerated through striking forms, his hands blurring as he cut patterns in the air. The power surged through him, dangerous, vast, the same force that had shattered him a year ago. But now it flowed through channels that could hold it. His rebuilt skeleton absorbed the stress, distributed it, and transformed destructive force into directed movement. He moved faster. Faster still. His feet left craters in the sand with each step. His hands displaced air with enough force to stir the robes of watchers 10 feet away. And still he held. Still the foundation supported. Still the golden frame glowed in his inner vision, containing what would have destroyed him before. Beast breathing last. The enhancement of senses, the expansion of awareness beyond normal human limits. Jon demonstrated this not with movement but with stillness, standing in the center of the yard, eyes closed, reaching out with perception that went beyond sight and sound. 3 guards on the eastern wall. One is limping, old injury, left leg, he favors it when he stands too long. His voice carried across the silent yard. The merchant outside the gate is selling fish, I can smell the brine from here. General Kai's heart rate is elevated, excitement or concern, I can't tell which. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jon ignored them. Finally, full integration. All 3 techniques together, the layered enhancement that had broken him in this very yard, on this very sand. Jon reached for everything at once. The power flooded through him. Water and thunder and beast, flowing together like rivers joining into a single current. More power than any normal body could contain. More force than flesh and bone should be able to channel. His bones held. His rebuilt skeleton sang with contained strength. The golden frame blazed in his inner vision, bright as the noon sun, solid as mountain stone. The techniques that had shattered him now worked for him, supported by architecture that hadn't existed a year ago. He moved through a complex form fast enough to blur, strong enough to crater sand with each strike, and aware enough to track every heartbeat in the yard. The twin sword patterns he'd dreamed of since Winterfell, executed with empty hands but perfect form. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. He could keep going. He could feel it, the sustainability that hadn't been there before. The foundation is supporting instead of fighting. The power flowing through him like water through channels, not like fire consuming fuel. But he stopped. Deliberately. Controlled. The techniques faded. Jon stood in the center of the yard, breathing normally, unbroken. I did it. It worked. I'm not broken anymore. The yard was absolutely still. No whispers. No movement. The crowd were processing what they'd just witnessed. General Kai rose from his seat. Walked to the edge of the platform, looking down at Jon with eyes that revealed nothing but saw everything. Impressive. One word. But from Kai, it meant everything. You've clearly made progress. The integration of your external techniques with Feng's internal training is remarkable. I've seen martial artists train their entire lives without achieving what you just demonstrated. Thank you, General. We'll discuss the tournament this afternoon. I believe we have much to plan. Kai withdrew, his advisors following. The crowd began to disperse, whispers finally breaking the silence, but different whispers than before. Wondering whispers. Impressed whispers. Sun Cao approached as the platform emptied. His expression had shifted, the skepticism Jon remembered replaced by something more complicated. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. That was real. Not a trick or an illusion. You've actually changed. The training. I know what training can do. This is more than training. Sun Cao's eyes were sharp, assessing. We should spar. When you're ready. I want to see how it holds up against a real opponent, not just forms in the air. Soon. I'll hold you to that. Sun Cao walked away, but Jon could see it in his posture. The older boy was already planning, already thinking about how to test what he'd witnessed. Mei Ling didn't approach. Didn't need to. Their eyes met across the yard, and her smile said everything. You did it. I knew you would. Jon smiled back. The training yard sand was still warm beneath his feet. The same sand where he'd collapsed, where he'd broken, where he'd proven everyone right who'd called him cursed. Now it was just sand. Just a place. The past couldn't hurt him anymore. He'd finally outgrown it. Chapter 19, The Sword and the Stone Part 2. Jon woke before the dawn, expecting the familiar greeting of pain. For 2 years, morning had meant a catalogue of miseries. The ache in the ribs Grazdan's guards had cracked, the stiffness in the fingers the slave masters had broken, and the deep, rattling wheeze of lungs scarred by the Jade Sea. He lay still in the soft bed of Tianli Fortress, waiting for the hurt to announce itself. It did not come. He flexed his right hand. The knuckles moved with the silent precision of oiled hinges. He took a breath, deep and slow, filling his chest until his ribs pressed against the skin. There was no catch, no burning stitch in his side. Beneath the flesh, his structure felt dense, heavy, and silent. It was a silence louder than the mountain wind that howled around the Stone Tiger's monastery. I am a house built on stone, he thought, the master's words echoing in the quiet room. The storm cannot shake me. He rose, the movement fluid. The floorboards were cold, but the chill did not penetrate the marrow. He dressed in the simple grey tunic of the household, though it fit differently now. His shoulders were broader, his spine aligned with a terrifying straightness that felt unnatural to a boy who had spent so long cowering in cages or hunching against the cold of the north. When he stepped into the corridor, the fortress was waking. The air, usually thick with the morning bustle of servants and the smell of wood smoke, felt different today. It carried a weight. He passed a pair of chambermaids scrubbing the flagstones. A week ago, they would have whispered behind their hands, "White devil, ghost child, sea curse." Today, they stopped scrubbing. They pressed their backs against the rough stone wall, eyes lowered, making themselves small as he passed. "Young master." Jon stopped. A kitchen boy, no older than Bran, stood trembling in the doorway of the buttery. He held out a bamboo steamer, steam curling from the vent. "Cook said that you would be hungry, Jon. Before the summons." Jon took the steamer. Inside sat a rice cake, hot and sticky, dusted with sweet bean powder. He looked at the boy, seeing the terror in his eyes. It was the way the kennel master's dogs looked at a wolf that had wandered too close to the castle walls, not with the disdain reserved for a stray, but with the primal fear of a predator. "Thank you," Jon said. His voice was rougher than he remembered. The boy bowed too low and scurried away. Jon ate the cake as he walked, the sweetness cloying on his tongue. In Winterfell, he had been the bastard, the stain on his father's honor, tolerated but never truly seen. In the slave pits of Yunkai, he had been meat, waiting for the butcher. Here, in the Golden Empire, he was becoming something else. A weapon. "I survived," Jon told himself. "That is all that matters. I survived." But as he approached the heavy doors of the General's solar, he knew that was a lie. Survival was the goal of the prey. Jon was done with being prey. The solar smelled of stale ink, map wax, and sickness. Master Ji sat in the corner, a scribe's board on his lap, his breathing a wet, rattling sound that filled the pauses in the conversation. General Kai stood over a massive table, a cyvasse board of sorts, but the map beneath the pieces was not a grid of tiles. It was the Golden Empire of Yti. "Sit," Kai said, not looking up. Jon sat. He kept his back straight, his hands resting on his knees. He did not fidget. Feng's training had burned the restlessness out of him. Kai moved a piece on the map. It was a dragon carved of white jade, placed squarely on the province of Jinko. "I expected Master Feng to send me a broken boy," Kai said, his voice as dry as old parchment. "Or a corpse. Instead, he sends me a report saying you have integrated the internal and external arts in a way he has not seen in a generation." "Master Feng is generous," Jon said. "Master Feng is a stone," Kai corrected. "Stones are not generous. They are challenging. If he praises you, it is because you forced him to." The general finally looked up. His eyes were dark, calculating, and devoid of the warmth a father might show or even the kindness a host might show a guest. He looked at Jon the way a smith looks at a hammer. "I viewed you as a curiosity, Jon Snow. A political liability, perhaps. A stray dog my daughter insisted on feeding." Kai tapped the jade dragon. "I was wrong. You are an asset." Jon remained silent. He felt Ji's eyes on him from the corner, milky and worn out. "Do you know what happens in the capital in 6 months?" Kai asked. "The Festival of Crossed Swords," Jon answered. "Master Ji told me." "It is not a festival," Kai said, disdain curling his lip. "It is a war. A bloodless war, fought with wood and pageantry, but a war nonetheless. The 3 factions, the Loyalists, the Western Lords, and the Polychrome Princes, do not meet on the battlefield anymore. It is too expensive. We meet in the arena." Kai walked around the table, his fingers trailing over the map. "The Western Lords believe House Kai is weak. They believe we cling to tradition because we lack strength. They field champions who are giants, brutes who rely on muscle and size." Kai stopped behind Jon's chair. "I intend to show them something they do not understand." "You want me to fight?" Jon said. "I want to unleash a foreign devil," Kai said softly. "A white-haired barbarian trained in the sacred stone tiger arts. It is a calculated insult to the traditionalists, Jon. The scene also serves as a terrifying display of power directed at the Western Lords. They will not know how to fight you. They will not know what you are." Jon looked at the map. He saw the pieces. He saw the game. He was the white jade dragon, to be moved across the board to strike fear into men he had never met. "I am not ready," Jon said. The room went quiet. Ji's coughing broke the silence, a harsh, wet sound. "Feng says you are," Kai said. "Feng says I have laid the foundation," Jon countered, his voice steady. "But a foundation is not a house. If I fight at full strength now, against men trying to kill me, I might break. And if I break, I am of no use to you." Kai frowned. "What do you want?" I will compete, Jon said. But not as I am. I must return to the mountains. Feng said I am ready for the jade transformation preparation. If I am to be your weapon, General, do not send me into battle half-forged. Kai studied him. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind against the shutters and Ji's struggle for air. Jon met the general's gaze without blinking. He held the stillness. Sharpening the blade, Kai murmured. Yes. Agreed, Kai said, turning back to the map. You will go back to Feng. But in 6 months, you will be in the capital. And you will win. I will win, Jon lied. Or perhaps it was a promise. He did not know yet. He left the solar feeling lighter, yet heavier. He was no longer a guest in this house. He was a sword, being whetted on a stone, preparing to cut for a man who was not his father, in a war that was not his own. The training yard had been cleared. The air was thick, heavy with the humidity of the coming rains and the weight of unsaid things. Sun Cao stood in the center of the sand, holding 2 wooden wasters. He wore light training armor, leather boiled hard and lacquered black. Jon stepped into the ring wearing only his tunic and breeches. Sun Cao did not sneer. That expression belonged to the boy he had been a year ago, the jealous rival who saw Jon as a usurper of affection. The young man standing there now looked at Jon with a grim, assessing clarity. Yesterday, you fought the air, Sun Cao said, tossing one of the wasters to Jon. Jon caught it one-handed. Today, you fight me. I don't want to hurt you, Sun Cao. Arrogance, Sun Cao said, settling into a low stance. Let us see if your bones are as hard as your head. Sun Cao moved first. It was the Yitish military style, fluid, aggressive, and circular. He came in low, a sweeping strike aimed at Jon's knees, followed instantly by a rising cut to the ribs. It was fast. Faster than he had been a year ago. Jon did not dodge. He stepped into the attack. He utilized the golden marrow foundation. He visualized his skeleton as a single, fused piece of iron, rooted deep into the earth. When Sun Cao's wooden blade struck Jon's parry, there was no recoil. No vibration. Jon's arm did not give an inch. It was as if Sun Cao had struck a statue anchored to the bedrock. Thwack! The sound was dull and heavy. Sun Cao's eyes widened. The shock of the impact traveled up his arm, not Jon's. Jon stepped forward. Not a lunge, but an encroachment. He moved inside Sun Cao's guard, his body occupying the space where Sun Cao needed to be. He caught Sun Cao's wrist with his free hand, a simple, bone-locking grip that pressed thumb against nerve and twisted. Sun Cao's sword clattered to the sand. Again, Sun Cao hissed, backing away and drawing a second waster from the rack. You are leading with your anger, Jon said calmly. And you are holding back. Sun Cao shouted. Feng didn't teach you to be a statue. I saw the lightning yesterday. Show me. He charged. This time, there was no finesse. It was a flurry of blows, a desperate attempt to overwhelm Jon's defense through sheer volume of violence. Jon sighed. Thunder breathing. 8th form. The spark was all that was left. The world slowed. The air in the yard tasted suddenly sharp and metallic, like ozone before a storm. The sound of Sun Cao's shout stretched into a long, low drone. Jon saw the dust motes suspended in the air. He saw the opening in Sun Cao's guard, a gap no wider than a finger, existing for only a fraction of a second. He did not think. He did not plan. The breath filled his rebuilt lungs, expanding the dense cage of his ribs, and the lightning fired through his nerves. Crack! It was the sound of air displacing. Jon disappeared. To the watchers on the walls, it looked as if Jon simply flickered. One moment he was 5 feet away, the next, he was inside Sun Cao's guard, his wooden blade resting gently against the hollow of the older boy's throat. Sun Cao blinked. He hadn't even seen Jon move. The wind from Jon's movement caught up a second later, blowing Sun Cao's hair back. Sun Cao dropped his waster. He didn't look angry. He looked pale, hollowed out by a sudden, terrifying understanding. "I hated you," Sun Cao whispered, his voice trembling. "For 2 years, I hated you. I thought you were special. I thought the gods favored you." He looked at Jon's face, the white hair, the grey eyes that looked 1,000 years old. "But the gods don't give power like that," Sun Cao said. "You paid for it. I can't even imagine what you paid." The rivalry died in the dust of the training yard. It didn't end with a handshake or a smile, but with the grim camaraderie of soldiers who realize they are in the same trench, facing the same dark. "Your footwork," Jon said quietly, lowering his blade. "On the advance. Your left shoulder still drifts. It tells me where you're going." Sun Cao let out a shaky breath, a laugh that was half sob. "Teach me, please." The sun was dying, bleeding crimson over the western walls, when Master Ji called for him. The solar was darker than the general's quarters, illuminated only by a few sputtering candles. Ji sat in a high-backed chair, wrapped in blankets despite the heat of the evening. The coughing was worse now. It sounded wet, like a sponge being squeezed. "Come closer, boy," Ji rasped. "My eyes are not what they were." Jon knelt by the chair. He could smell the sickness on the old man, a sweet, cloying scent of decay that no amount of incense could hide. "I watched the spar," Ji said. "Miraculous." "It is just training, master." "No," Ji wheezed. "It is biology. Physics." He reached out a trembling hand and touched Jon's wrist. "Your bone density, it rivals a master who has practiced the internal arts for 20 years. Your lungs. I can hear them. They fill completely. The vessel is no longer cracked, Jon Snow." "You healed me," Jon said. "You and Feng. We pointed the way. You walked the path." Ji gestured weakly to the small table beside his chair, cluttered with medicine bottles and bloody handkerchiefs. A scroll case of lacquered bamboo lay amidst the debris. "Open it," Ji rasped. Jon broke the seal. The parchment inside was fresh, the ink stark and black, but the smell of the case was ancient. "A copy," Ji wheezed. It took the fortress scribes 3 months to transcribe the text from the rotting original in the archives. "A treatise." The treatise was written 300 years ago by the abbot of the Iron Lotus. It speaks of the integration of internal and external arts. Of the golden frame. Ji coughed, his whole body shaking with the effort. He wiped his mouth with a handkerchief, which came away spotted with pink. "My time is short, Jon. A year. Perhaps less." "Master." "Hush. Listen." Ji's milky eyes found Jon's. "General Kai is a magnificent man. A brilliant strategist. But he loves the war more than his blood. He loves the game more than the pieces." Ji gripped the arm of his chair. "Mei Ling will be alone soon. When I am gone, she will have only these walls. And her father's ambition." The weight of the words pressed down on Jon, heavier than any stone on Feng's mountain. It was not a command of a general but the plea of a dying grandfather. "She trusts you," Ji whispered. "Do not let her become just another piece on her father's board. Protect her. Promise me." "I promise," Jon said. His voice was thick. "I will protect her." "Good," Ji breathed, closing his eyes. "Now go. She is waiting for you." The garden was a pool of shadows. The cherry trees were bare, their skeletal branches reaching up to scratch at the moon. Mei Ling sat on their bench. In her lap, she held a bundle wrapped in blue silk, embroidered with silver wolves. Jon sat beside her. He didn't speak. He felt the hum of the meditation stone in his pocket, harmonizing with the silence of the garden. "You're leaving," she said. It wasn't a question. "In a week. And then the capital." "Yes." She looked down at the bundle. Her fingers traced the line of the embroidery. "I saw you today. With Sun Cao. He is getting better," Jon said. "He is terrified of you," she corrected gently. "And he loves you for it. It is a strange thing to see." She lifted the bundle. "These are yours. You're ready. I saw you move. You are faster than thought." She offered him the swords. He had carved the twin practice swords himself. The symbol of Arthur Dane. The sword of the morning. The dream of the bastard boy who wanted to be a hero. Jon looked at the silk. He remembered the feeling of the wood in his hands in the stable yard, the desperate need to prove he was worthy. He remembered the shame when his hands had failed him. He reached out and touched the silk, but he did not take the swords. "No," he said. Mei Ling frowned. "Why? You are strong enough now. Your bones will hold." "My body can hold the power," Jon said softly. "But my mind." He looked at his hands. "Feng taught me something on the mountain. He said that if you grip too tightly, mastery escapes. Like sand in a fist." He looked at her. Her eyes were dark pools, reflecting the moon. "I wanted these swords because I wanted to be someone else. I wanted to be a legend. I wanted to be worthy of my father. And now I know that the swords are just wood. The power isn't in them. It's in the foundation." He gently pushed the bundle back toward her. "Keep them for me. Until the tournament." "Jon." "I will not wield them in practice," Jon vowed. "I will not use them to show off or to spar. I will wield them when it matters. I will fight for your father's faction. When the stakes are real. When I earn my place." Mei Ling looked at him for a long time. The distance between them, usually filled with the awkwardness of childhood friendship, seemed to vanish. They were two exiles, sitting in the dark, burdened by secrets and expectations that would crush grown men. She set the bundle down between them. Then, she reached out and took his hand. Her skin was warm. His was cool, tempered by the mountain air. "You are not a bastard here, Jon," she whispered. "You are just Jon." He squeezed her hand, holding it loosely, as Feng had taught him. "And you are not just the general's daughter. You are Mei Ling." They sat in the silence, hands touching, breathing the same air, while the world turned toward war around them. The week passed in a blur of motion and stillness. Jon trained with Sun Cao, the two of them moving through forms with a synchronization that spoke of hours of sweat and shared bruising. He read Xi's scroll by candlelight until his eyes burned, absorbing the ancient wisdom of the Iron Lotus. He meditated in the garden, the golden light filling his bones, while Mei Ling sat nearby, reading or simply watching, guarding his silence like a sentinel. Then, the morning came. The mist lay heavy on the valley floor, obscuring the path that led up to the stone tiger's domain. The air was cold, tasting of pine and snow. They gathered at the gate. Sun Cao was there, absently rubbing the dark bruising on his wrist where Jon's grip had locked the bone during their final spar. He nodded at Jon, a sharp, respectful gesture. "Don't die up there, Snow," he grunted. "I need a sparring partner who doesn't bore me." "Keep your left shoulder up," Jon replied. "Get moving." Master Ji stood by the gatehouse, wrapped in furs. He did not speak, but he caught Jon's eye and tapped his chest, over his heart. "Remember your promise." Jon nodded. Mei Ling walked him to the edge of the road, where the cobblestones gave way to the mountain track. She wore her riding leathers, her hair bound back tight. She did not cry. She stood tall, her chin raised, every inch the daughter of a general. 6 months, she said. 6 months, Jon agreed. Then the capital. The festival. I will see you there. You better. She stepped close, grabbing his tunic, and pulled him down into a fierce hug. It lasted only a second, but it felt like an anchor being set. Then she shoved him away. Go. Before the mist clears. Jon turned his back on the fortress. He touched the jade wolf pendant under his tunic, feeling the cool stone against his skin. He adjusted the pack on his shoulders. He began to walk. His steps were heavy and rooted, each footfall a connection to the earth. Thud. 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 It was the sound of stone striking stone. He did not look back. He did not run. He was no longer the boy who had washed up on the shore, broken and drowning. He was the foundation. He was the bedrock upon which a war would be fought. He climbed into the mist, and the high grey silence of the peaks claimed him. Chapter 20, The Jade Path Part 1. The mountain did not change, but the boy who climbed it had. Jon Snow placed his boot on a narrow lip of granite, the air thin and sharp as broken glass in his lungs, and pushed upward. There was no heave of effort, no desperate scramble for purchase. His body simply rose, fluid as water defying gravity, his weight shifting before his feet fully settled. The pack on his back heavy with supplies and scrolls and the accumulated weight of expectation might have been filled with feathers for all the burden he felt. He remembered the first time he had climbed this path. He had been a broken thing then, lungsick and desperate, dragging himself up the stone tiger's mountain on limbs that trembled with every step. Each breath had been a negotiation with damaged tissue. Each handhold had been a prayer. He had been chasing a dead man's legend, Arthur Dane's ghost, Marcus Chen's borrowed memories, anyone's story but his own. He remembered the second time. Returning for marrow refinement, carrying the fear that he wasn't enough, that the foundation the bone-washing had built would crumble under the weight of what came next. He had climbed with hope then, but hope threaded through with doubt. This was the third ascent. Jon paused on a switchback where the mist parted like a curtain, revealing the world spread beneath him. The terraced rice paddies of Yeti cascaded down the distant hillsides in patterns of emerald and silver, the paddies flooded for planting, mirror bright in the morning sun. Villages scattered across the valley floor like pebbles tossed by a careless hand. The road he had traveled wound through it all, a pale thread connecting the fortress he had left to the monastery he approached. The first time, I climbed toward something I didn't understand, he thought, his fingers finding familiar holds in the rock face. The second time, I climbed toward something I feared. He touched the cold stone of the cliff, his calloused fingertips reading the grain the way a scholar reads text. This time, I climbed toward something I choose. His body felt different with each ascent, not just stronger, but more present. The marrow refinement had done its work well. He felt dense now, heavy in a way that had nothing to do with burden. It was like the difference between a wooden sword and one forged from castle steel. Both had the same shape, but the steel sword was packed with potential that wood could never hold. His breath came effortlessly in the rarefied air, drawing sustenance from an atmosphere that would have left the old Jon gasping. He carried more than supplies. Master Xi's scroll, the treatise on integration that the dying scholar had pressed into his hands, rode secure against his spine. The meditation stone hummed gently at his hip, a fragment of the mountain's silence made portable. And against his chest, beneath his tunic, the jade wolf pendant absorbed the heat of his skin, warm as a promise. But the heaviest thing he carried was invisible. General Kai saw him as a weapon being forged. Sun Cao saw him as a rival who had stopped being a rival and become something more complicated, a standard to reach for, perhaps, or a mirror reflecting inadequacy. Master Xi saw him as a vessel for knowledge that might otherwise die with him. And Mei Ling? Mei Ling saw him as Jon. Just Jon. Which was somehow heavier than all the rest combined. 6 months, he reminded himself, resuming the climb. We have 3 months here to learn the impossible. 3 months at the fortress to integrate it. Then the tournament. It wasn't enough time. It couldn't possibly be enough time. But the timeline wasn't his to dictate. He could only fill the unforgiving minutes with as much work as his body could survive and his mind could process. The road would be what the road would be. His task was simply to walk it. The mist thickened as he climbed higher, turning the world to grey wool, muffling sound until only his heartbeat and footsteps remained. The monastery emerged from the white silence like something dreamed rather than built. Ancient stone walls the color of thunderclouds, wooden gates black with age, and roof tiles green with centuries of moss. The gates stood open. Jon slowed. Usually, the gates were shut, a barrier that tested resolve, a silence that asked whether the climber truly wished to enter. But today, a figure waited in the opening, grey robes fluttering in the wind that never stopped blowing at this altitude. Jon Snow. The monk's voice was soft, barely louder than the wind. Master Feng expects you. Brother Chen. Jon felt warmth spread through his chest despite the cold. Chen had been the one who left rice cakes outside his door during the dark days of bone washing, who had cleaned the blood from the meditation stones without comment or judgment, and who had treated Jon's suffering as simply another part of the mountain's rhythm. I came as soon as his message arrived, Jon said, bowing his head. He knows. Chen stepped aside, gesturing Jon through. He has been preparing. Jon walked through the gate, and the sensation washed over him immediately, a feeling of settlement, of coming to rest after long movement. The smell of incense and pine, familiar as his own heartbeat now. The sound of wind chimes singing in the eaves, each note precise and patient. The sight of monks moving through the colonnades with the deliberate slowness of men who had made peace with time. He wasn't a trespasser anymore. He wasn't a foreign curiosity tolerated for political convenience. He was a son of this mountain. It had claimed him during the bone washing, tempered him during the marrow refinement, and now it waited to see what he would become. A monk sweeping the flagstones looked up as Jon passed Brother Wei, who had once spent 3 hours correcting his stance without speaking a single word. Wei nodded, a simple acknowledgement between equals. Jon returned it. Winterfell is in my blood, Jon thought, walking the familiar paths toward the central courtyard. But this place is in my bones. The central courtyard was as he remembered it, swept stone, ancient pine, and the flat meditation rock worn smooth by generations of students who had knelt upon it, broken upon it, and transcended upon it. Master Feng Huang stood beside the rock, hands clasped behind his back, looking at nothing and everything. He didn't turn as Jon approached. He didn't need to. You've returned. You summoned me, Master. Now Feng turned. His face was a landscape of weathered stone, wrinkles carved by decades of mountain wind and internal cultivation. But his eyes were young, bright with an intelligence that saw through flesh to structure, through words to meaning. I suggested. The choice to come was yours. There was no choice, Jon said, setting his pack on the stone. The training isn't finished. Something flickered across Feng's expression, not quite a smile, but the ghost of one. No. It isn't. And what comes next will be harder than anything before. I'm ready. Feng looked at him the way a smith looks at steel before the final tempering, assessing, measuring, and calculating what heat the metal could survive. You think you are, he said softly. That is not the same thing. Master Feng's private quarters were a study in deliberate emptiness. Jon had never been allowed inside this room. During the bone washing and marrow refinement, the inner sanctum had been forbidden, a space reserved for masters, not students. Now, following Feng through the narrow doorway, he understood why. The room was smaller than his cell. The walls were bare stone, unadorned by scroll or painting. The floor held only rush mats worn thin by years of meditation. A low table sat in the center, empty except for a single object. A piece of jade. Pale green, roughly the size of a fist, unpolished and raw. Yet it seemed to hold its own light, a cloudy luminescence trapped within the stone, glowing faintly in the dim room. Sit, Feng said. Jon sat cross-legged, the jade between them like an offering on an altar. Do you know why this stage is called jade transformation? Jon studied the stone. Because the bones become like jade. Dense. Strong. Harder than ordinary bone. That is the surface answer. The answer a child gives. Feng's voice held no criticism, only observation. If hardness were the goal, we would call it iron transformation. Stone transformation. But jade has another quality, one that makes it precious beyond its beauty. Feng reached out and lifted the stone. His hands calloused, dangerous, capable of breaking bone with a touch, cradled it with surprising gentleness. Jade is not simply hard. It is carved. It is shaped. A skilled craftsman takes raw jade and creates whatever his vision demands: vessels, ornaments, weapons, art. The stone does not resist the carver's intention. It yields to will while maintaining its essential nature. He set the jade back down with a soft click. Your bones, after marrow refinement, are strong. Dense. A foundation capable of supporting the power your techniques demand. Feng's eyes found Jon's and held them. But they are fixed. Static. They do what bones do: support weight, protect organs, and anchor muscle. They are structured without flexibility. And jade transformation changes that. Jade transformation teaches you to make your bones responsive. To shape them with thought the way a craftsman shapes stone. To harden them when you need armor. To soften them when you need flexibility. To become not merely strong, but adaptable. Jon frowned, turning the concept over in his mind. Softening bones? If bones soften, they break. Normal bones break, Feng corrected. Transformed bones adapt. How is that possible? The skepticism leaked into Jon's voice despite his efforts. Bones don't change because you think at them. Don't they? Feng's eyes glittered with something like amusement. What did marrow refinement teach you? Jon recited the lessons he had absorbed over months of practice. To feel my bones. To cultivate the golden light. To guide my body's natural rebuilding toward specific ends. And what is jade transformation but the absolute refinement of that principle? Feng leaned forward, his presence filling the small room. You learned to guide growth over months. Now you will learn to guide change over seconds. Seconds. Jade transformation is instant. Or near enough. Feng's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. A master of this stage can harden his forearm to block a blade that would shatter ordinary bone, then in the next breath soften his joints to slip a grapple that should have torn his shoulder from its socket, then harden again to deliver a strike that cracks stone. Jon stared at the jade, trying to imagine his own bones behaving like living clay. It sounded like magic, not the subtle internal cultivation he had learned, but something from the stories old Nan had told in Winterfell. Something impossible. You're describing something that shouldn't exist. Most mastery seems impossible, Feng said dryly, until you achieve it. A silence settled between them. The jade seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light, patient as stone, waiting. But understand this, Jon Snow. Feng's voice hardened. This is not a stage that can be rushed. Bone washing took months of physical breaking. Marrow refinement took months of cultivation. Jade transformation takes years. The word hung in the air like a sentence. I have 3 months, Jon said. Before the tournament. I know. Feng's voice held no judgment, only the cold clarity of fact. You will not master this stage in 3 months. You may not even achieve the first plateau. But you can begin. You can learn the principles. You can take the first steps on a path that will occupy you for years to come. What can I realistically achieve? Before the tournament? Feng considered the question with the gravity it deserved. Awareness, perhaps. The ability to perceive your bones as changeable rather than fixed. The first glimmers of conscious influence. He paused, weighing possibilities. And perhaps if you work very hard, and if you possess the talent I believe you do, the ability to harden your skeleton momentarily. A second or two of enhanced density. Enough to survive a blow that would otherwise break you. A second. Jon couldn't keep the disappointment from his voice. That's all. That is everything. Feng's voice cracked like a whip. 1 second of jade hardness could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Between walking away and being carried away in pieces. Do not despise the second, boy. Wars are decided in less. For 3 days, Jon Snow sat on the eastern terrace and accomplished nothing. The terrace was a slab of grey granite jutting out over the abyss, exposed to the rising sun and the endless wind. It was where he had first learned to meditate during the bone washing, where he had found the golden light during marrow refinement. It felt right to return here for this new struggle. Begin as you always begin, Feng had instructed. Find your bone sense. Feel the golden light. That part was easy. Jon closed his eyes, his breathing settling into the rhythmic cycle that had become second nature. His awareness sank inward, past skin, past muscle, anchoring into the architecture of his being. His skeleton blazed in his mind's eye, a framework of golden fire, dense and powerful, the legacy of months of cultivation. Good, Feng had said. Now instead of simply feeling your bones, try to change them. Start with your right hand. Try to make the bones denser. Harder. Jon focused on his right hand. He knew these bones intimately, had felt them breaking in Grazdan's compound, had felt them burning during the bone washing, and had felt them strengthening during marrow refinement. If any part of his skeleton would respond to his will, it should be this. Harden, he thought. Become stone. Become steel. He pushed with his mind, bearing down on the bone the way he might bear down on a heavy weight. He visualized the golden light compressing, the marrow turning to iron, and the calcium fusing into something harder than nature intended. Nothing happened. He tried again. And again. He gritted his teeth until his jaw ached and pushed until sweat beaded on his forehead despite the mountain cold. His hand remained simply a hand. By the afternoon of the third day, Jon's skull throbbed with pressure, his patience had frayed to threads, and his bones remained stubbornly, mockingly unchanged. Again, Feng said from the shadow of the overhang. It's not working. Jon broke his posture, opening his eyes to glare at his own palm as if it had personally betrayed him. I'm doing what you said. I'm focusing. I'm pushing. You are forcing. What's the difference? Feng stepped into the light, his robes rippling in the wind. How do you fall asleep at night, Jon Snow? Do you push yourself into sleep? Do you command your dreams to come? Jon paused. That's different. Is it? Sleep just happens. When I stop trying to stay awake. Exactly. Feng sat across from him, settling into stillness with the ease of long practice. You treat your bones as if they are foreign objects. As if they are a sword you must grip or a stone you must lift. You push at them from outside yourself. They're inside me. Physically, yes. But in your mind, they are separate. You are the commander, they are soldiers awaiting orders. Feng shook his head slowly. Soldiers can be commanded. The self can only be allowed. Jon stared at him, frustration warring with exhaustion. I don't understand. When you activate thunder breathing, Feng said, do you command each nerve to fire faster? Do you order your heart to accelerate? No, I just do the technique. My body knows what to do. Because the technique and your intention have become one. You do not command the thunder, you become the thunder. Feng poked Jon's chest, his finger hard as iron against Jon's sternum. Jade transformation requires the same fusion. Your bones must become as responsive to intention as your muscles are. Not commanded. Not forced. Simply, moved. I've had 11 years to learn to move my muscles, Jon said. I've only been aware of my bones for 10 months. Then you have much work ahead. Feng rose, brushing dust from his robes. Stop pushing, Jon Snow. Start feeling. You cannot conquer your own skeleton. You can only inhabit it. The breakthrough came on the 9th day, and it came not through effort but through surrender. The sun hung high overhead, baking the terrace. Jon was exhausted not from physical exertion, but from the constant strain of reaching for something that wouldn't be grasped. He had stopped trying to harden his hand. He was simply sitting with it. His mind drifted. He thought about the letter he hoped would arrive from Mei Ling. He thought about the cat she had named Ghost, the irony of it still making him smile. He thought about the twin swords wrapped in silk, waiting in her room for the day he would be worthy of them. He thought about his hand. Not as a tool. Not as a weapon. Not as something to be commanded. Just, his hand. Part of him. As much him as his thoughts or his heartbeat or his name. My hand doesn't need commands, he realized. My lungs don't need orders to breathe. My heart doesn't need instructions to beat. My bones are me, too. They've always been me. I just forgot to include them in the conversation. He closed his eyes and let himself drift. He didn't visualize the golden light and didn't reach for the bone sense. He just felt the presence of his arm. The weight of it. The solidity. He wondered, idly, what it would feel like if that solidity were absolute. If the spaces between marrow and mineral simply ceased to exist. Not pushing toward the sensation, just wondering. The way you wonder about a half-remembered dream, reaching for it gently, waiting for it to surface. What would it feel like to be Jade? And for one instant, barely a flicker, faster than a heartbeat, something answered. It wasn't hardness. It wasn't a physical change he could have measured. It was a sensation of potential. A feeling that the structure of his radius was not a fixed wall but a held breath, waiting to be released. Jon's eyes snapped open. The sensation vanished instantly, the bone feeling solid and immutable once more. But it had been there. He had felt the gate unlock, even if he hadn't walked through. I felt it, he whispered. He looked up to find Feng standing in the doorway, 2 cups of tea steaming in his hands. The master had appeared without sound, or perhaps Jon had simply been too deep in his own awareness to notice. Describe it, Feng said, offering him a cup. It wasn't hardness. Jon struggled for words adequate to the experience. It was readiness. Potential. It felt like the bone was waiting. Like it was listening, and for just a moment, it heard me. Feng nodded slowly, satisfaction settling into his weathered features. That is the first plateau. The awareness of potential. Your bones are no longer fixed in your perception, they are fluid. Changeable. You understand now, even if you cannot yet act on that understanding. Jon looked at his hand, flexing the fingers. The sensation was gone, but the memory of it remained bright and strange and full of promise. How long until I can actually harden them? Days? Weeks? Perhaps longer? Feng sat across from him, cradling his own tea. But the first glimmer is the hardest step. Many students spend months merely hammering their will against a locked door. You have found the handle. Jon took the tea. It was bitter and hot, grounding him in the present moment. Now what? Now you practice turning the handle. Every meditation, reach for that sensation. Don't try to open the door yet, just touch the handle. Remind yourself it exists. Build familiarity until the sensation of changeability is as natural to you as the sensation of touch. The letter arrived on the 14th evening. Brother Chen brought it after Vespers, a scroll sealed with the green wax of House Kai. Jon waited until the monk's footsteps faded before breaking the seal, settling beside his single oil lamp to read. Mei Ling's handwriting flowed down the page, elegant, precise, each character formed with the care of someone who had been taught that penmanship reflected character. Jon. The fortress feels too large without you. I keep turning corners expecting to find you there, and the emptiness when you're not is becoming familiar in a way I don't like. Sun Cao trains twice as hard now. He won't say your name without scowling, but he's stopped being angry and started being hungry. I think you showed him something in that demonstration, not just what you could do, but what's possible. He wants to reach that. It's made him better. Less bitter. Almost pleasant, on good days. Master Xi's cough is worse. He hides the bloody handkerchiefs, but I've found them in his washed ebon. I haven't told him I know. What would be the point? He's determined to die standing up, teaching until the last breath. He says you've given him too many ideas to waste time resting. That sounds like something you would say. Father is planning the tournament delegation. He hasn't officially named you, but everyone knows. The servants whisper about the Stone Tiger's student, the foreign boy who moves like lightning and stands like stone. I tell them you're just Jon. They look at me like I'm telling them the sun is just a candle. The swords are still wrapped in silk. I check on them every night, it's become a ritual now. Touching the wolf pommels, feeling their weight, imagining what it will look like when you finally wield them. I dream about it sometimes. You, with both blades, moving the way you moved in the training yard but more complete. How is the new training? You said jade transformation would be different. Is it harder? Are you struggling? You can tell me if you're struggling. I won't think less of you. I might even like knowing you're human. Right back. I need to know you're still you, even up on that mountain. Mei Ling. P.S. Ghost caught a mouse yesterday. He brought it to me like a gift and looked very proud when I pretended to be impressed. I think he's decided he owns the garden now. Jon read the letter twice, hearing her voice in the careful strokes of her brush. Then he pulled his inkstone closer and began to write. Mei Ling. I am struggling. Every day. You don't have to worry about me being human. The mountain reminds me of my limitations constantly. The training is different. Not painful like bone washing, not slow like marrow refinement. It's about control, learning to change my bones the way I change my muscles, making the solid fluid and the fixed flexible. It sounds simple when I write it. It isn't. I spent the first week trying to force something that refuses to be forced. Feng finally explained it in a way I understood. My bones are part of me, as intimate as breath. I don't command my heartbeat. I can't conquer my own skeleton. I can only inhabit it. Yesterday, I felt something. Just a glimmer, the potential for change, waiting beneath my awareness like a fish beneath dark water. Feng says it's significant progress. I'm not sure I believe him. It feels like one step on a 1,000-mile road. But it's a step. And the road is the road. Tell Sun Cao to keep training. I want a real fight when I return, not a demonstration. And tell him I'm studying the scroll he gave me every night. The integration he described, I'm beginning to understand it. Internal and external aren't opposites. They're partners. Each one makes the other more than it could be alone. The swords are safer with you. If I had them here, I'd be tempted to use them before I'm ready, and we both know how that ended last time. Keep dreaming about them. I dream about them too. About you watching while I finally become what I've been working toward. Write again soon. Your letters make the mountain feel less far from everything else. Jon. P.S. Ghost sounds like a worthy guardian. Better than most wolves I've known. Tell him the garden is in good hands. He blew on the ink until it dried, then rolled the parchment carefully. He would give it to Chen in the morning. The lamp flickered, shadows dancing on the stone walls. Jon lay back on his cot, feeling the meditation stone's gentle pulse against his hip, the jade wolf pendant warm against his chest. Somewhere beyond the mountain, the tournament waited. General Kai's ambitions waited. The great game of Yiti's warring factions waited, patient and hungry, ready to consume whatever was fed to it. But for now, there was only the mountain.